Speaking of, if I get up in the middle of the meeting, I got a diesel sitting outside. I might have to go start it every once in a while. No, I'm serious. I am
Okay,
serious.
that's all right. Well, good afternoon. Counselor, you're just making it on time, you know? That's perfect. Today, I'm sharing the committee of the whole meeting, which is a work meeting because Counselor Kenley is on holiday somewhere, and we wish him well. And we have Counselor Granger on Zoom somewhere. Oh, there you go, Counselor. So we're calling this meeting to order. We will do a land acknowledgement. The town of Cardston acknowledges that we are located on traditional Blackfoot Confederacy territory. And we want to welcome our delegation. Thank you, Becky, for being here for us. We have an agenda that we need to adopt. Councillor Brown?
I make a motion to adopt the agenda of the Committee of the Whole meeting held this 4th day, 2025.
Thank you. All in favor? Thank you very much. So, Becky, we're going to give you the privilege to come to the lectern and do a presentation on behalf of the Chinook Foundation and illuminate us as to the needs of the future.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I know some of you, but if you don't know me, my name is Becky Doig, and I'm the Chief Administrative Officer for Chinook Foundation. And the presentation I brought is Chinook Foundation 101. Jeff and I were talking. He thought it'd be a good idea if the Chinook Foundation came and presented to the town councils about once a year, keep you up to date on the work that we're doing and look for opportunities for collaboration and things like that. So I'm just going to tell you the basics about who we are and what we do, but then there's also an opportunity, to the extent that you want to, just kind of like push me away if it's too much, to talk about opportunities we might have to work on some projects together. So, okay, go ahead. So the Chinook Foundation was established by they call it a housing management body, which is a kind of a nonprofit, but it's not it's just its own category of nonprofit by ministerial order in 1995, and it has the rights or responsibilities, accountabilities for the management, operation, and maintenance of seniors and social housing accommodations in all the municipalities in Cardston County. So we only have seniors housing at this point, but you can see by our ministerial order, it does give us a scope to also operate social housing should there come a time that there is social housing in this area. Doesn't mean that somebody else couldn't also operate some social housing, but we could expand our mandate to include housing for families or other types of affordable or social housing. Okay, so we can go on. Okay, so we have 2 seniors lodges, the Chinook Lodge in Cardston and the Diamond Willow Lodge in McGrath. And we have self-contained housing apartments, the Temple City Villa in Cardston. So altogether between the 3 facilities, 143 units of housing. Next. Okay, so you guys probably all know the Chinook Lodge. Mm-hmm. And I do want to talk more about it later because that's one of our biggest opportunities and needs is to look at what we're going to do about the Chinook Lodge. But for now, the Chinook Lodge has 62 units. The managers carry card, and up to 20 of the units are contracted with Alberta Health Services to provide what they now call continuing care type B, which used to be called designated supportive living level 3. So that's the highest level of care anyone can get at the Chinook Lodge is unscheduled care by a healthcare aide. And some of the people at the Chinook Lodge receive scheduled care from a healthcare aide, and many of the people receive no care at all. The building was built in 1961, was modernized in 1992, and Chinook Lodge, like all of our other buildings, is owned by the provincial government, by the Alberta Social Housing Corporation. By the way, anyone, feel free to interrupt if you have any questions or you want to talk more about something. Okay, so the next slide. Okay, Diamond Willow in McGrath was built in 2018. It has 43 units, 35 studios for single people, and 8 one-bedroom units, which are for couples. So it can accommodate 51 people. All the units there are lodged. We don't have any care staff at that facility at all. So some of the people do receive some scheduled care, like home care, but it's by a third party, just like you might receive home care if you're living in your own home. And once again, that building's owned by the province. Cammie McClellan, that's anyone who's got McGrath connections. Cammie Atwood McClellan is the manager. There's a few pictures. Can go on if you want. Okay, so just in case you're not totally familiar, just so you know what a lodge is, how it's distinct maybe from like Lee Crest. A lodge provides housing, food services, so 3 meals a day and snacks, housekeeping service, so your room gets cleaned once a week and they'll clean your linens, your towels, and bedding. We do building and grounds maintenance, entertainment, recreation, and social programs, security, and then there's optional services like medication assistance or personal laundry for an extra fee. And I think I mentioned how the care works. So if it's at Chinook Lodge, it's our staff. It's at the Diamond Willow, it's an outside third party. So the Temple City Villa is just apartments for seniors. Those buildings, it's one building built in 2 parts. So from the government's point of view, it's like 2 buildings, but it's the Temple City Villa, part of it was built in 1978, the rest in 1981. It has 38 one-bedroom units. It's owned by the province, and on the next slide, I think you'll see too that the villa is low-income housing. So like the lodge accommodates people of a variety of incomes, but the villa is really primarily meant to serve the low-income senior population. So there's, if you want to get into the villa, there's a point scoring system based on need, including, and then you have to be below the core needs income threshold, SNIT, to be eligible. But when there's no one eligible, people who are above that can be also considered. If there's no one eligible on the waiting list and there's units available, some of the people that live there do have higher incomes, but for the most part, the government put it there to serve low-income Albertans who are seniors.
So Becky, we should mention that their rent is set. It's whatever it is for that $800, whatever it is. We're over at the lodge. It's depends on your income. Is that correct?
Kind of. So in both. So are you interested in knowing the fee structure? So at the lodge, we have a 2-tiered fee structure, a full rent or a subsidized rent, and it depends on if you're below. They set a lodge threshold every year. It's about 32,000. About 31,000. So if you're above that, if your income's above that, you're going to pay the higher rent, which right now would be $2,065. If you're below that, you're going to pay the lower rent, which is $1,665, and that includes everything, all the meals and all of that, as part of the rent. And at the villa, what you're paying is rent geared to income, so 30% of your income up to a maximum. The maximum, I think, is $775 right now, plus electricity and cable and parking. So yeah, the most you can pay is 30% of your income, and
The province they have to allow certain extra income. They can't touch that, correct? $300 and something a month that they.
oh, that's for the lodge, yeah. The government has a rule that we have to allow people a minimum residual income if they're living in the lodge. That's $365, just got changed in January. So in the event that we have someone who comes to us who couldn't afford to pay $1,665 and still have $365 left, we would have to lower their rent to make sure that they for sure have $365. Having said that, anybody who is receiving all of the benefits that they should be, like old age security, guaranteed income supplement, Alberta Seniors Benefit, that's even if they've never worked, should have enough to pay our lower rent. But there are situations where people don't have all of those benefits for one reason or another. They're coming from out of province, they haven't always lived in Canada, they've got a spouse living in their home and they're at the lodge. Like, there are situations like that, but most of them can afford to pay the subsidized rent and still have at least $365 left in their pocket, usually more. Yeah, and some of that might be on the next slides, but when we come to it, we'll just skip it. Okay, so just so you know how we're structured, we have a board of directors, which is made up of 2 municipal councilors from each of McGrath, Cardston, McGrath, Cardston County, and 1 each from Glenwood and Hillspring. So that's our ministerial order dictates that that's how our board is composed. So Councillor Court and Kenley are the Town of Cardston representatives on our board. And every year when you have your organizational meeting in October, we need new appointments, even if it's the same person. So yeah. So I'm the CAO, and each of our 3 sites has a site manager. The site manager oversees the staff at their location. We can go on. Okay, yeah, and I just mentioned the board appointments. Okay, so we can move on. Okay, so who are we responsible to? So the ministry that they've changed the name of recently, the Seniors Community and Social Services Ministry, and the Alberta Housing Act governs a lot of what we do, both at the lodge and senior self-contained. But for lodges, like, we are responsible to the member municipalities. That's why we have our board made up of councillors. And also Alberta Health licenses our lodges. And of course, like anybody else, we have lots of other legislation that governs us as well, like things like FOIP and occupational health and safety. Okay, next. Okay, so we want to provide an opportunity for our seniors to be able to age in place in our communities. That's a lot of what we're about. You know, whatever their income, whatever their medical needs, we're hoping that they can stay here. And I just, I'm hoping that that resonates with the people on this council as well, that that's something that you consider valuable in the community. So we can skip through. So our mission, yeah, keep going. I really love our values, but I don't need to talk about them today particularly. But I will say one thing about our values is that one of our most important values is home, that we like to think of ourselves as their home first and not as an institution. We may provide some health supports or other supports, but we don't want them to feel like they're living in an institution. We want to, this is their home, and we try to treat it like their home and try and respect their independence and their privacy and their choice making and their dignity and all that kind of thing. All of that really, a lot of the things we do come out of our focus of, like, this is their home. And I hope you can feel that when you go to visit one of our facilities, that it feels like a place where people live rather than an institution. Okay, so our funding. I thought you might be interested to know how we're funded. The vast majority of our money comes from rent and service packages or whatever. So in the case of lodges, now there's health funding that covers health costs. So I left that out because it should sort of balance, doesn't always, but health funding for health expenses. So apart from that, just looking at what it costs for accommodations, so 77% of our costs or our income is in rent, and 9.5% in requisitions, and 13.5% in the LAP grant, which is a grant we get from the province of Alberta that's based on the number of individuals we have that are below the threshold. So they give us like a flat rate of $625 per month for each resident that we have that's below the threshold. That allows us to offer them the subsidized rent and tops us up a little bit as well. So at the villa, there's the municipal requisitions don't fund the villa at all. It's only for lodge when we have requisitions. So they're funded mostly by rent, and then they've decided to grant us a deficit budget, which means they want us to zero out every year, but they provide us a little money to zero out, so that comes to about 9% of our budget. So that comes from the province. And not included in those numbers, but which is a really big subsidy from the government really is the fact that they own the buildings and don't charge us a mortgage or rent, right? And then also they have a capital maintenance program, so we can request funding for capital maintenance projects. It's very underfunded, so we often have capital maintenance needs that aren't being addressed, but it is a big help knowing that, like, I think the roof of the Chinook Lodge is going to get replaced this year with the capital maintenance funding. Hopefully that ends up happening. You know, last year, the air handling unit at the Chinook Lodge was, well, I mean, the heat exchangers were cracked, and there was a potential that could leak carbon monoxide into the building. So the government replaced the air handling unit, which cost $250-something thousand. So that is a big way that they support us from time to time. Okay. Okay, so I just wanted to explain about requisitions. So the ministerial order gives the Chinook Foundation the right to requisition. Is basically a right to tax, right? So within our county for the needs of the foundation. And the municipalities collect those requisitions on behalf of the foundation, but it's just like the education taxes, it's a flow-through system. So there's a line item, you collect it, and then it comes to the foundation. It doesn't affect your budget. And I've been assured by the town CAOs that sooner or later they always collect property taxes, one way or the other. So it's based on the equalized assessment value of property. So the requisition has been, or this year, this is the numbers at the bottom here. So a $300,000 house in anywhere in Cardston County, it doesn't matter what municipality it's in, would be taxed or would be requisitioned $53.10. $1 million property would be $177. That's the size of the requisition. This is per year, once per year, and it shows up on property taxes. So it's, 17.7 cents per $1,000 of property value is the current, this year's rate. Okay, so I just wanted you to know that our requisitions are much lower than the provincial average. If we were at the provincial average, the total requisition for all the municipalities in our county would be $844,000 instead of $293,000.
Becky, can you help me understand that? That's the slide that I had question for.
This one?
Yeah. Is that notion of average, why is it so much higher in a province? What are we not doing the same as them?
Well, I think what it comes down to fundamentally, is that there's a vast financial inequality around the province as to how much resources each area has. Like I often talk to Kristen Chambers, who is the CAO of Evergreens Foundation. She has Edson, Hinton, Jasper. I mean, they've had their share of bad luck. Don't get me wrong. I'm not totally jealous of them for that, but their requisition is $12 million for like 300 lodge spaces. So like, because they have so much money up there, they don't know what to do with it. So on the one sense, it's because the tax value in our area is lower, and so we don't want to overburden our taxpayers. But I think many municipalities, the taxpayers are paying more like $100 a year on a $300,000 house compared to $50. So I think there's a combination of, I think we're under requisitioning, as well as, being sensitive to the, in Evergreens Foundation, it's not just the homeowners that are paying that requisition, it's all the huge oil and gas and, mining, forestry, whatever, big players there are that are generating a lot of wealth in their municipalities. Same with even the cities would have so much more in the way of resources than what we have, because they, all the businesses, right, and industry and everything else. So that's part of it.
My follow-up question then would be, what would you like to see political body like us help you regarding the funding?
Okay, well, we just did a lodge program review last year, and what I advocated for around the province, and I talked to all my friends who are from like lower requisitioning areas, and what I was telling everybody was we should make lodge requisitions like school taxes, where the rate is set province-wide and is, you know, and like they collect based on equalized assessment, the same for any property all around the province, and then they distribute based on the number of units of lodge. I would love to see that happen. I'm sure that the places that are getting 12 million in the requisition would not like to go back down to the average, you know? So I'm sure that that would be a big fight. But the other point I would like to make from your point of view is, because the next thing I want to talk about is a new Chinook Lodge, right? Mm-hmm. So can we operate on how much requisition we're getting? Like, we're very lean, like compared to, like, I talk to a lot of other foundations similar size. They have like more admin help, they have more full-time staff, they have you know, like things like vans or buses to take their residents places. Like, they have a lot of things that it's just not even in the range of what we could possibly afford. But there's a lot of nice things that other foundations are able to do that we just can't, because we don't have their kind of money. But having said that, we have had a surplus the last couple of years, so like we can more or less operate on what we have. But where we don't have enough money, and where I'd like our municipalities to start thinking, is because we need to be planning for the replacement of the Chinook Lodge. And a lot of municipalities are doing two types of requisition, a capital requisition as well as an operational requisition. And I just like to plant a bug in your ear that I think if we're ever gonna get a new Chinook Lodge, we're gonna need to look at possibly, I'm gonna just throw out there, doubling our requisition, but making half of it capital requisition, that if it started soon, would go in a fund toward a new Chinook Lodge, and then after the Chinook Lodge, a new Chinook Lodge was built, would be the money that would help pay the mortgage. Because right now, we don't bring in enough money to operate and pay a mortgage. So it's just, unless some miracle new funding stream comes along, which doesn't exist right now, that's what we're gonna need to be looking at. And so I just, trying to throw that in, you know, get that into people's minds as something to think about. Would it be reasonable for a taxpayer who owns a $300,000 home to pay $100 or $110 a year so that we can eventually replace that Chinook Lodge? So
It's just interesting where you use the term mortgage when the province will own the building.
Well, they own our buildings now, but that's not the way they're doing it going forward.
Okay.
So people that are building now, I am hoping that they'll come out with a program specifically for lodges, but basically right now, if you get approved for the Alberta Housing Partnership Program, you might get 30% of your costs covered, and then you can apply to CMHC and get a loan, a 50-year loan, which might have 10% of it forgivable, and then you're on the hook for the rest of the cost. And so, you know,
Idea what the
cost would be?
Yeah.
I mean, just ballpark 20 million, you know? So like for us to have like a 50-year mortgage on, say, you know, $13-14 million, I mean, that was if we did it today. I mean, it could be 30, it could be way more than, I don't know. You know, we haven't gotten to the point of designs or costing, but just hearing from some other places and what they've done, I think that's about a minimum starting place. Probably be more like, I think the Diamond Willow was 15 million, so it'd probably be 25 to 30. I mean, there's been so much inflation. So I'm just saying, like, it's not going to be an easy or a cheap thing to do. It's going to take some commitment, and even that housing partnership program, not everybody's getting that funding. So, I mean, we can't move forward at all until we can get some funding, but even with whatever funding's available, even if we're successful in getting it, it's going to take some local sacrifice.
Councillor Burton?
So Becky and I have known each other longer than any of you can imagine.
He used to live in Kingston, where I grew up. See, he's wearing his Queen's University
I think she
sweatshirt.
was a beehive yet. So anyway, couple of questions. Because last meeting, we did talk about, I think, a real need, not just to replace, but to expand, if you look at our demographic. You know, your suggestion of if we were to double it, and by the time we got there, like, that's a drop in the bucket if you look at actual numbers.
Yeah, it still might not
So
be,
if we're at 35 million now,
Yeah.
30% of that is
yeah.
12, 13 million dollars. That's, we may have to be more creative than that. So with
Yeah.
CMHC, is that, we can tap into that money by right, or do we have to qualify somehow?
Yeah, no, basically what the province is trying to do is line up their funding with CMHC so that you either get both or neither.
Oh,
You know what I mean? So, well, I guess, not to say that, they won't approve people that aren't also getting CMHC. They're trying to, there may be overlap one way or the other, but they're trying to make sure that the people they get approved, that they're approving are also getting CMHC so that their project can actually work. But I personally think that the Alberta Housing Partnership Program and CMHC is not adequate support for a lodge. Like, I think it's enough support to do social housing, like where your main expense is just like upkeep of the building, but when you're providing all those services, it's just, the rent isn't enough compared to this, you know, the cost of the services, you know? So one of the things that a lot of places are doing as well, and I don't know how well this would fly in Cardston, you guys might have a better sense of it than I do, but some of the smaller towns that are trying to get lodges are looking at doing a certain percentage of their units as like full market, so a $3,000 or $4,000 unit with the same services, or maybe some special a la carte services, and it's like nicer, it's upscale, or it's 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, whatever, instead of the studio. So some places are looking to cover some of their costs by selling, or not selling, but renting some units at $3,000 or $4,000 a month.
wow.
Kind of like a mixture of the private and public. And I don't know if people in Cardston would pay that. I don't know, because I know that there's probably some people who do have some wealth, but if they're like people who've sold their farm and have wealth from that, they may not have a mindset that is conducive to spending that much money. So
That's a polite way to put that.
Go ahead, Councillor Burton, you
So
have a
my-
question?
Becky, back to your comment, you know, hoping that we value having people from our community be able to stay here. That's hugely valued. You know, my mom turns, she won't mind me saying this, but 90 in a few weeks. My dad's 96. And, you know, we bought a house across the street, so we literally look at each other's front windows. That's how important it was to us to be close. Is preference given to our residents? So I know you said there's a
Yeah.
financial qualification, but is preference given to the same base as our tax base, like it does with a school, where generally kids from the area tax go to the school that's provided by that tax? Is that the same with this?
Well, with, both with lodge and the social housing or the senior self-contained housing, the government has a point scoring system, but they allow 10 points out of 100 to the housing management body to decide how to award those points, and we award those points based on living in the requisition area. So it does give local people an edge. But, you know, you're only competing with somebody if your building's full. And the lodge has usually had a few vacancies, so I think like the vast majority of our people in the lodge are local, and when they're not, we're grateful they're there so that we don't have a vacancy. It's kind of, so yeah, we,
So that requisition that I'm talking about,
yeah.
and I realize it's based on municipal assessment, do you set the rate of that, or does the
Our
province set
board
that?
does.
The board does.
Our board does, and our board, in my opinion, has been very reluctant to increase that amount. And I'd like to start changing that thinking, because, sorry, Tim, I'm throwing you under the bus a little. I don't think it was you as much as some others. I mean, but But I'd like to, empower the board to mobilize the resources in our community to support our purposes, right? And just knowing how important and how big this will be to get a new lodge is just something that we're just gonna all have to, I don't know, think a little bigger.
Do you have the resources to actually put a plan together or a needs assessment?
Well,
In other words, because we could want something, or we could say, well, how could we get to something?
so we've done the housing needs assessment and affordable housing strategy, right? So that was step one. The next step would be to apply for a grant for the study phase, where you start looking at how many units and what size, and a business
Talking about,
plan,
yeah.
and a design, and start looking at locations and stuff like that. So that would be the next step. So this year, I would like to apply for that grant, and then, get to the point where we have a good idea of what it is we think we want and we think we need. And although I don't expect to be finished that work this year, to start it. And then once we have all that in place, that's when we can start trying to attack funding for the project itself. And I'm hoping, you just keep hoping that, while we go through these steps one by one, that a door will open and an additional funding source will come available between now and then. But I think we also can't wait around hoping for, a magic bullet that may never come. The Diamond Willow got that magic bullet. It was almost entirely funded by the province and the federal government. And I think some of our board members are spoiled by that. Well, we got the Diamond Willow for free, we should get the Chinook Lodge for free, but that's not what other organizations are experiencing right now. That's not the model that's happening right now. I hope that something will change and improve by the time we're ready, but I think we also have to be asking ourselves, what can we contribute?
So, Becky, just to go back to that requisition, to follow up with the idea. If your board is not willing to increase that requisition, then what?
Then I guess they don't want a Chinook Lodge in our communities, right? They're the board that are supposed to champion this type of housing, and I guess if it doesn't matter to our board, who does it matter to? That's...
So are you planning to do presentation like that?
Yeah, I've already been to McGrath, and I'm going to the county. I'm a little nervous about going to the county, because they're the ones that are usually most hesitant about requisitions. And
Okay.
even though it flows through, they think it's a personal attack, because 50% of the total requisition bill comes from through the county. But they have 50% of the assessed property value. And I'm sure
We'll
that's
soften
true
them up
with,
for you.
I'm sure that's true for school taxes and everything else too, that they pay 50,
Yeah.
they pay just as much as all the other municipalities combined, but, that's because there's more people and more money in the county, so.
Jeff, want to ask you a question?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't ask you last time we talked to you, but, so it isn't the program of the province to own the facilities anymore?
Right, yeah, so they're wanting to contribute and have us be owners.
Yeah. So when it comes to the planning stage, do they sit at the table as far as trying to dictate the amount of units, the amenities? Do they exercise discretion in the planning at all?
That's a good question. I do think that in order for units to be under the lodge program, that they're gonna have to meet certain criteria, but I haven't exactly heard how much they want to be involved in that process.
Okay.
But I should find out more about that. That's a really good question. I haven't got to that stage yet, so.
Councillor Burton wants to ask
So-
you someone, then we'll carry
I
on.
want to say a lot of things, I was just going to say one. So if you look at the contributors to that fund, if we were either replacing or adding to the Chinook, chances are that's within the town of Cardston. Does the province have, so who buys the land? So for example, if we donate the land and it's worth $300,000, where does that sit in the budget? Does the foundation buy it from the town? Does the town donate it? And then we say to the other members of our group, we're in for 300, how much are you guys in for? That kind of thing?
Yeah,
Have you
I
dealt
mean-
with that before, or do you know what that
Yeah,
would look
so
like?
in McGrath, the one thing the town did was donate the land for the building. And so that was the extent of the contribution that was made by the community. So, yeah, I think it'd be, from my point of view, it'd be lovely to see the town help us with, us, finding a site that, the more, if a site was donated, that's less requisition money that has to be collected, right? So I would love to see that happen. I'm not trying to tell you what to do, I don't know. But will the other municipalities contribute in kind beyond requisitions? I don't know if they would or not. Maybe if a site needed to be prepared and there was a
Planting
matter.
that seed in your head so that we
No,
want to
I-
talk to them.
Yeah, what would they be willing to give? I mean, because especially when it comes to the county or Glenwood and Hill Spring, like, their people live at the Chinook Lodge too.
Jeff?
Just one other thing in helping council plan for this in the future. So, right now, the infrastructure of the foundation is all right next door to each other. So
Yes.
you've got the two villa buildings, the Chinook, all right there, and we can all guess at what happens to the existing Chinook when a new one's done. That's a conversation for another day. But if the site for the future one is not contiguous to the current buildings, is that a problem for your operations?
No, I don't think so. I don't, I mean, there's a few like nice things about that, Meals on Wheels, going over to the villa and things like that, but I don't think there's any kind of deal breakers in being on separate properties. Yeah, and potentially too, there is this opportunity that if we build somewhere else, the Chinook Lodge may become available for, or the site of the Chinook Lodge available for another purpose. So like in McGrath, when we got the new Diamond Willow Lodge, the province deeded the old Diamond Willow Terrace Lodge to the town for $1, and then the town sold it or gave it to Surex, and they've repurposed that into the building where they do their insurance, which brought business to town. So there was kind of a win-win in it for the town, in that
Good.
sense. Okay, so, yeah, let's
Thank
go
you.
on
We
to-
sent you a little bit on a spin, but
That's
it's
okay,
okay.
I'm happy to.
Might have covered a lot of this now.
Yeah, so yeah, aspirations, this new Chinook Lodge idea, and just want to start thinking about, or like to have your council we're not ready to build yet anyways, and we're only, not even applied for a grant to do the study, so it could be a year before we start doing this study, which would be where we'd start looking at locations. So just putting a bug in your ear as you're discussing different sites that might be a possibility in the town or whatever, that you keep the lodge in mind as where would be a good place to have a new Chinook Lodge in Cardston. If we can start thinking about that and work together so that as we move down the road towards this, we can think of a good location.
Do you have a rough idea of the size of a parcel you would be looking at? Is that 20 acres? Is that 10 acres? What is it that you want?
Yeah, I don't even know that amount yet.
Yeah, that's difficult to pin
Do you know how
down,
many
right?
acres we're on?
No, I can find that out. You do have, it would be nice to have more off-street parking, even at the Chinook, more space for those
Yes.
types of amenities.
And it would be nice to have a little more, like, kind of green space and that type of
But
thing.
that's why I'm thinking, is
Yeah.
that 10, 20 acres? What
But
is
like
it?
the Chinook Lodge currently is mostly on one level, the Diamond Willow's on 2 levels. So like you can go up too as a possibility to make a slightly smaller space work.
Right,
But
I see what you're saying.
I think
Okay.
one problem, though, with it, we're almost compelled to find somewhere else because the people have to live somewhere while we're in
Yeah.
Yeah,
construction,
in
right?
between.
So
So
I think
like-
we would have to leapfrog where we build a new facility, they go over there, and then maybe we could build more villas over at that site later kind of
Right,
thing, but we can't
Exactly,
dishome them.
yeah.
yeah, like it might be possible. I'm not saying this would be an ideal situation, but to take the back half of the lot and demolish 2 wings and start building and then demolish, it may be possible, but I think that could be very problematic as well.
But it might be so much noise, so much disturbance to the residents.
Yeah, it could be very challenging to do something like that. But some places are building that way. I don't want to throw that idea out of hand, like, before thinking about it. I understand there are some properties adjacent to the current Chinook Lodge that, maybe could be a place to expand the footprint a little bit, so something like that might be possible. I'm not saying would be my first choice or anything, but
Good.
but yeah. So where would we do it? What would you like to see? I guess is something that you can start thinking about, like more units, or do you think our community needs more high-end units to keep the high rollers happy to stay here? You know, just, I mean, whatever the case is, I'd love to get your council's feedback on the process as we move forward. And I'd like to just like stay in the loop, you know, at all the stages.
Can I ask you, Becky, are there some lodges that have the model you're talking about, which is a mixed model of really rental, high-end rentals, and a mixture of low-medium kind of health?
Well, I think there's a lot that are in the idea stage, or that are in maybe even construction phase. This is kind of a new thing where the government's not funding as well as they used to be, and where they're looking at us to try and use like a mixed model or a mixed income model. So I haven't really seen how well they work. Like, I haven't seen enough of them to know. So yeah, I think it's a bit of an experiment at this point.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Any other
Becky,
questions?
You know, the lodge and villa properties are about 6 acres.
Between the two together.
Between both.
Okay.
Yes. In
So-
idea scale.
Thank you.
Okay, well, so that gives us a better idea
Yeah.
already.
And if we had a little more space, I think it'd be
would
more
be
ideal.
adequate.
If you had 10 acres, it would be a kind of nice
That's the
parcel.
temple, it's 10 acres.
So essentially, what you would like to see our council possibly do is reserve land somewhere,
Yeah, that would be,
working with you to try to see,
Mm-hmm.
kind of pinpoint where a piece of land could be possibly used to build a new facility.
yeah.
When we look at those area structure plans, we're specifically looking at our two big, less developed areas. You know, we'll put that in there somewhere in our considerations.
All right, so
Yeah,
you want to carry on?
Yeah, that's about it. Like, other aspirations, like, there's lots of ways that our foundation could collaborate. I mean, go back to the last one. This one they don't care about because it's McGrath, but like, oh, okay, maybe it's the next one, sorry.
Sorry,
After-
Am I going the wrong way?
Okay, now you're going back, so go
Okay,
forward.
sorry.
Okay, and the one right after this one. Okay, so like, we could do a better job. I think we already are working some on emergency planning, working on FCSS opportunities for seniors. Like, for example, I think some of our people, and probably a lot of other seniors in the community, would really benefit from having FCSS support tax filing
Oh,
for
yeah.
seniors, and also help to access their seniors' benefits. And Cardston's already doing Meals on Wheels, but that's not really working in McGrath, so that was something I brought up in McGrath. Community events back and forth, like the lodge could host like a fraud prevention for seniors, you know, it could be like a gathering space for the community. Yeah, and if there's other ways we can support you, and then we can just go on. Yeah, and we can kind of skip these, but, you know, there's an election coming up, and if there's any changes in the council, just, I know you have this document already, so if you're thinking you might be interested in being on our board in the future, this slide and the next one just talk about what the duties are. And then that was it. Are there any other things anyone wanted to discuss, or we?
I think we had plenty of questions
Thank
for
you.
you, so thank you so much
Thank you for
being
making so
kind.
much time for us, or for me, and for the value that you place on the seniors in the community and their housing. You may have noticed, I don't know how many of you get down to the Chinook Lodge, but we did do a bunch of renovations there to improve just the feel of it in the meantime. And so we're hoping that gets us through till the time that we can actually do a proper renovation, so.
Thank you.
I just want to thank Becky and the staff, they're tremendous.
Yeah.
Our management staff is very professional, and we need to make sure that and she's aware of this and we're aware of this, that we can at least match wages so they're not being drawn off somewhere else. So right now, we're a very good place for staffing, and we have a tremendous management team, so
Well,
Yeah,
Councillor
Well done.
Court, your next bet is to push that board to go towards the idea of a new facility.
So Dane
That's
County-
your job.
So Dane County, guys.
yeah, but yeah, the more people are on side with it,
Yeah.
and also recognize that, because when I mentioned the idea of a capital requisition to the board, it was like, no, we're never doing that. That's not something that's ever gonna happen. And that was like out of hand, like completely shut down before I even brought it up. But
Must not
I think
been
we
there.
have to like gradually evolve our thinking so that we can actually move forward. So that's part of my mission, is to get that thinking out there to a broader group of people so that, you know, it becomes a little bit something that's worth consideration. So,
Thank you. And I also believe that it would be important for the community to know a little bit of a situation regarding the present lodge
yeah,
and for them to understand the need to move forward towards the idea of a new facility and to understand the funding model that has changed. So I really think there's a little bit of education that needs to be done in the community too.
yeah, and especially like say if, for example, if in 2026 our board decided to increase requisitions or introduce a capital requisition, then I think there would need to be a lot of like communication that goes along with that so that people understand why.
Yeah, well,
Not just trying to be greedy, but that we're trying to prepare for something that's really needed. So I think you're absolutely right on that.
thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye. Yep. All right, we have the minutes of November the 5th that needs to be approved. Councillor Jensen,
I'd like to make a motion to adopt the minutes from the November 5th, 2024 Council Committee of the Whole meeting.
thank you. All in favor? Thank you very much. All right, so we will turn the time to Jeff. Do you want to look at this one?
Yeah,
The bylaw 1618, traffic safety bylaw?
yeah. This up to me a little while ago, and I think it's good timing. Lior has been looking at signage, speed limits, things like that. He's been talking with the RCMP, and it just so happened that Councillor Burton had brought up something with me, and we have a bylaw, I believe it's 1618, which is traffic safety, and it regulates those types of things. And I thought it might be a good idea tonight, if you've been in for 3+ years now, you've heard from a lot of people. I've got quite a list of things from Lior as far as ideal places for signage and little things he's noticed over time. But I'd really just like to gather any feedback I could tonight from you, if you have heard complaints about, you know, concern areas or things that people are frustrated with and that kind of thing, so that we can bring all that together. I'd like to be able to meet with, there's some good resources in town, like the driver's education instructor, for
I was going
example.
to suggest that.
Lior said that he's an excellent resource because, and I'll give you an example right in front of us. Right here by the cenotaph is a 30-kilometer-an-hour sign heading west. But if you turn off of 2nd Street, you don't see another 30-kilometer-an-hour sign until Town Square.
Which means you could be
Right,
speeding.
so you could turn off of there, it's 50 here, but you don't know it's 30 there until you're to Town Square. And so that sign needs to be on the other side of the block, so that so it's those kind of things where the driving instructor was telling Lior, I have these kids that are trying to be so precise, and they turn and say, I have no idea what the speed limit is right now.
In a school zone.
And yes, there's a school zone, and so that helps in that case, but just little things that he's been a really good resource. And Lior has this week and last week been meeting with the elementary school, and he's actually been doing traffic exercises with all the kids the last few days at the elementary. He set up a crosswalk in the common area and teaching kids how to do that. And he was up there today for the morning. And so he's been meeting with administration on concerns around the school and trying to mitigate. They've got some kind of if you're on the east side of the school, they've got that bus lane made out of the concrete blocks, but there's also a crosswalk that goes through that.
Exactly.
Which is terribly problematic on a lot of levels, but it's also terribly problematic getting buses and parents through that in an orderly
Yeah,
fashion before and after
totally.
school. So I think right now they probably made the best of it, but there's just little things like that that we want to get some feedback on. So I'd like to be able to just sit at the laptop and Joshua and I can just take notes of, if you go around the table, Mayor, and any feedback, we
Right.
want to take note.
Maybe I'll start and I'll let you go with it. The
And I can
most,
pull a map up if you need to
the-
on the screen.
no, for this one, I don't need the map, but a very common complaint is those 30-kilometer zones. And that has been coming back through many, many citizens who are very frustrated with that continuous 30-kilometer zone.
Well,
So,
and they're not continuous, that's part of the problem,
well,
is you get
yeah,
a block and a block and a block. they get
and
On
then
Fourth
you,
Avenue.
anyways, something has to be reviewed regarding those zones. Whichever we fix them, I don't know, but there is a problem there. Anybody else?
Yeah,
Councillor?
along with what you're saying, I've had a lot of people say, why don't you just put it all at 40 kilometers an hour? Forget 50. Of course, 30 is gonna have to be in the school zones, no doubt, and playground zones. Everything else, he said, just put it at 40, then people don't have to worry about 30, 50, 40. That's just what I've been hearing back.
We've seen
Can I comment on that?
communities.
Okay, give me a second. There was Councillor Brown, Councillor Granger. Go ahead.
You're saying complaints or different things people have brought up. So, of course, the one is over by the golf course is that getting the kids from the golf course across that highway over to by Councillor Court's house. That is a concern with the traffic, and they go flying down that road. So that is terrifying, having little kids crossing there.
Highway's a problem.
And then the other area for me that, and I know Councillor Burton is the same, is right there at Epic. We're really good with these incredible flashing lights now at a lot of the crosswalks going down. But that one by Epic has little kids crossing all the time. And the trick is, as you're coming, you can't see because people are parked there, and then you have kids. Anyway, those are the two that I get told about.
Right. Councillor Granger?
Yeah, Councillor Court, I agree 100% with your thought. I think you and I agree more often than not on things. But
Most of the time.
when I was seconded to the engineering department in Banff, we basically saw the entire town of Banff go to a 40-kilometer-an-hour, except for the 30 in the school zones, exactly like you just said. And there was a lot of wringing of hands and angst about it, but at the end of the day, you know, some 15 or 20 years later, you could go back to them and they would say it works because it's safer and people get used to it. One of the concerns I've got, even with the current speed limits, is I don't know if it's perceived lack of enforcement, but I just can't believe how fast people drive on the street I live on, which is 2nd Street East. It's just crazy. I mean, some of those people are, I haven't clocked them, but it's way more than the speed limit. And I think enforcement needs to be stepped up in this town that way. And I don't know if that's our people or RCMP. I know it's resources, but I think that's a concern.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. The turnaround, they're on the ice and they land on my lawn.
Yeah.
So that's really fun. Councillor Jensen.
How is it decided where a crosswalk is? I know, okay, so I live up by the junior high, and there's crosswalks coming off of where the junior high is, but you get down to where my house is, there's no crosswalk. And yet I have witnessed children almost getting hit trying to cross
That
the
street
street
on
there.
Third.
You know, and I don't think there's a crosswalk that's over by the corner of the church that goes over to Hollingsworth. I don't, and that's another kind of bad area because you're coming up, the car's coming up that hill and someone's crossing, it's kind of a little dangerous. So how do you determine where a crosswalk goes?
I have a cynical response and then I have a technical response. So let me suppress the cynical one for a
Good for you.
second. Get to the technical one. So
Any corner.
it's difficult. I did some math on this a couple of years ago, and I can't remember the exact numbers, but in Cardston, if you take all of the intersections, there would be about 300 and something potential areas for crosswalks, and we have about 40, right? Because the question is, are we going to spend $100,000 a year repainting crosswalks at every single intersection? The general convention is you cross on a corner, and you look both ways, and you
That's the way
cross.
it is.
What's happened over time, many of our crosswalks are, let's call them politically motivated. They were put in because someone complained that we weren't thinking of their child in particular, and so we put a crosswalk at that location. But it's no more warranted than almost any other location in the community councilor. So I think by the schools, they're especially important. It does delineate that, but right now, you can't see one crosswalk in the whole town. They're covered in snow. And yet somehow those kids have to cross safely, or pedestrians in general, I should say, have to cross safely. Crosswalks are a tool, but I would say they're far less effective than we give them credit for. You see the human being in the street long before you'll see the crosswalk. And again, about 90% of our intersections aren't marked. So schools, I think for sure, we see more of them concentrated around the schools. The four-way stop sign, for example, on 4th and 7th, 4 crosswalks, perfectly appropriate. No problem there. It's a busy intersection, and so that makes sense. But the rest are sometimes, I hate to say it, they're kind of based on request or complaint, but there isn't data that drives it. And so that becomes problematic because your question is excellent as to where should they be and where shouldn't they.
Councillor Burton, Councillor Granger.
Thank you for all of this discussion. Some of the comments that I've heard, by far the most is the 2 stretches down, the 30, 50,
I know,
40.
that's
You
crazy
get
story.
lost. And with our kids, I pay for their first exam and then they pay all subsequent ones. So I've put a lot of kids through there, and I think probably our best resource is that driver's ed instructor. He knows where to fail them if they're snotty or whatever, right? Like, there are things that are traps for the unwary. Some of the areas that, beyond that, the street, it'd be 3rd Avenue East and 2nd Street East, where you go over the bridge. We do have a flashing light there.
Yeah,
So if you're headed east, there is a flashing light, but the visibility is so bad. Like, honestly, in the daytime, when people don't have lights on their vehicles sometimes, like, you just cannot see them coming over, and in the winter, if it's slippery, you don't know if you have enough time to get out, and
Yeah.
even if you see nobody,
Yeah.
and I know we've got a 30-kilometer, and I don't know what else, I'm not saying I have a solution, but
right.
I've had, I don't know how many near-death experiences there, as have my neighbors, and they've mentioned them to me. So that's,
Yes, a dangerous
I don't know what we
one.
do, but that's a spot.
It'd
Another
be
one
nice
is,
if they moved it, when they move the street up, so it's not curving like this.
and
That's helped a lot.
even the slope of that, Councilor Court, when you're
Very
coming down the
steep.
Oh, I get
hill and when
that.
you turn right, like to go
Yeah.
towards my place,
Yeah,
it's a wonder how many don't end up in their lawn, you know?
Yeah,
So that's one. Another one, we just have a very high vehicle pedestrian area in front of the post office.
yeah.
Again, I don't know what to do about it. If you talk about convention, the convention there is, you take the closest direct line to your vehicle. I do that, everybody does it.
Yeah.
And I think people slow down there because they expect lots of people. But anyway, that's another hot spot.
I just want to mention, Counselor, it's interesting because this one comes up a lot. I've literally seen some of you may have seen it, we had an overpass design
Right.
at one point there. This is how
for pedestrians, yeah.
Yeah, it was, we were kicking around anything.
The story was at the time that
I remember
it
that.
was not palatable to the councils of the day to remove more parking space by putting a crosswalk, because we would have lost 4 spaces.
Yeah.
On each side.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know, again, I'm not
And so
solution.
that was the story of the day.
Yeah.
I have
We
a
had
couple more
looked
if I
at
could.
it.
Yeah.
So if you go 5th Avenue East up towards the Stake Center and the junior high,
Yeah,
as you go up the hill,
You don't see.
If people are crossing to the church, you cannot see them, that we don't have a good sight line there. And sometimes you're speeding up to go up the hill, and so you're not at the junior high yet, it's literally right at the crest of the hill before you.
point.
Yeah,
That's
and I
my
wondered if
point.
that's what you're talking about, but that's,
Yeah.
like, I know the names of the kids that have been nearly mowed down there, and it's,
Had an accident there, actually.
it's really a dangerous spot. Even
You know,
keeping the speed limit, it's still too fast. Like, I'm in now habit now of slowing down about 20 kilometers as I crest, because like on Sunday or a mutual night or something, so many kids are
that-
crossing the
yeah.
street right there. And seniors cross there
Yeah,
too.
yeah, it's
And if-
dangerous.
and if that hill is a little bit slick, you have to,
You
as
need
a
to run.
driver, you have
And
to
that's-
kind of gun it.
Yeah.
Yes,
to get
that's,
up
that's
it.
exactly what I'm talking
Yeah.
about. So I think those are my main areas, just, and everybody will have an opinion, but I think if we at least just review it as a good once-over, like if we do it every 10, 15 years, that's good, and it's been that long.
Just a second, Councillor Granger wanted to say something. Councillor Court, Councillor Jensen.
Just quickly to answer Councillor Jensen's question, how do you decide where to put a crosswalk? The Roads Transportation Association of Canada, they put out basically the Bible for urban roadway designers, and there's lots of information from that group, RTAC for short. So you could look that up. I don't know, Jeff, if we have a copy of the geometric guidelines in the
About
office,
that
but
thick.
that stuff might be online as well. But anyway, clinically for roadway engineers, there's recommendations, based on site distance and adjacent land use and traffic volumes and those kind of things as to when you should have a crosswalk.
Okay. Councillor Court,
Quick, this is more of an enforcement thing and a pet peeve. They're heading south on Main Street. Oh, there's an opening over by Ming's. You turn it into,
yeah.
and same thing at
Yeah,
the post
yeah.
office.
Agreed.
I don't know how,
It's horrible.
I wish they'd catch him because it drives me
yeah,
crazy.
yeah, there's a lot of U-turn. Councillor Jensen,
Oh, going
Councillor
back to Jeff's comment to me about, you see a person on a crosswalk before you see the crosswalk and whatnot. So what is the purpose or the advantage of having a crosswalk then? So, if you're on a crosswalk and you're hit, is the fine more?
Oh, yes.
Or, explain
Sure.
what is the purpose of the crosswalk, then, versus not having a crosswalk.
No, and I appreciate that, Counselor. I'm not an expert in this area by any means, but
Nor
the
am I.
the crosswalks do delineate to park traffic and moving traffic that there's areas set aside that we should expect pedestrians, right? So it's giving you kind of notice. And when the streets are clear, you can see the crosswalks, and that's great. But like I said, for 3-4 months around here, you don't see them. And so we can't rely on them. We have to rely on those crossing to try and do so safely. But, I always think about on 4th Avenue at the high school where we push parking away and cross-hatch out spots to the sides so that people can, when it's busy, there's good sight lines and people can expect that people are crossing there. I think they serve a valuable purpose for that, for letting you get out into the roadway safer. I agree with the 4th Avenue and Main Street issue, and this was one of the main pushes for looking at this whole Main Street redesign was to try and make those intersections far more safe. Having angle parking and then that kind of crossing is just,
doesn't work.
it's just a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
So to your question, Councillor Jensen, I think it really is just trying to get the community to understand where there is heavy pedestrian traffic and where it's important to be cautious.
Good.
Thank you.
I was just gonna
Councillor
say, like Jeff said on Epic, which I think is our most dangerous place in
Yeah.
town,
Agreed.
that we do have other tools. So that design shows bringing, I don't know what you call it, Councillor Granger, but where you bring people out further before they cross the street, and there's a bit
Yeah.
of a barricade so they're not run over as they're
Right.
standing there, and
Yeah.
those types of things.
I call those elephant ears.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about, because you honestly can't see people for those
No.
parked cars and stuff, and so, no fault of the people crossing, they're on the sidewalk, they're trying to be careful too, but, so I think we look at, not just signage. We say, we have to just match the circumstances, so in that corner is so dangerous, maybe we need more than signage, we may need now, before our design, to move those out elephant ears or whatever out into the street or whatever it takes. Because again, I think safety is our number one priority as a council.
I agree. So Jeff, did that give you
No, this
quite a
is
bit
great.
of?
It's always so, no, it's great. This is exactly what we wanted, and I actually brought it. I asked Leor to put it together, and so, I mean, this whole page and and one line on the next is just things that he's saying, here's
Okay.
what I've observed, here's where we have dangerous spots, here's where.
All right.
So even, for example, I emailed the guys, actually, the guy emailed me today with those flashers we bought for Main Street, and I said, hey, quote me on a second one, because the elementary is very concerned about 5th and 7th, where kids cross right into the elementary school. There's a crosswalk there, and Leor was just saying, man, we'd love to have something there, and so we'll look at all these tools we have. I do chuckle a little bit, not because I have an answer, but so many of these are how they are, because previous administration and councils have fixed them from how they were so that this way was better, right? So 4th Avenue is a great example of that. So 4th Avenue is 30 all the way from the elementary school past to Main Street now. Why? Because it used to be 30 and then 50 and then 30.
That's right.
So you went school,
like it.
then 50, then Town Square, then 50, then high school, then
Right.
Pool,
I know.
then Main Street, and it was up and down and up and down and up and
And it's
down.
the other side, I hear more complaints about where it is intermittent.
Turn up.
Yeah, so third now, if I go right up here, it's 30 from here to just after Town Square. And then it's 50 to the end. The other thing that Leor did this year is he actually worked with the driving instructor, and they looked at all the school zones or playground zones, and those are far more consistent than they were 6 months ago. So, because the enforcement and the education to people is different, and they were all over the map, because many of our school zones also have green space and playgrounds. So they were
Right.
both.
Yeah.
Right, and so he's been trying to harmonize that a little bit so that he can do community education, and everyone's pretty clear that they're all just going to be playground. I don't remember which one it is now, but they're all going to be one of them. And so here's the rules of the road. And I do appreciate, like I said, he was this morning again at the elementary school with another grade doing pedestrian safety with the elementary school kids, and he's been doing that in the mornings all week.
Good.
But this is great. And I will take his feedback and this feedback. We'll come back with some things for you. It's a bit weird that this bylaw actually has an attachment, which is a map of all the signage in town, which is essentially saying we can't change it unless we do a bylaw amendment every time we change a sign. So I will tell you right now and publicly, we have not been terribly compliant with that. So you'll remember when we changed the yield to a stop up on 2nd or something in 7th.
2nd Avenue.
We didn't do a bylaw amendment.
Right.
We haven't done that well, and I'm not sure that's a great way to do it. So we may be bringing back to you something that amends that a little bit.
Okay, one more question and then we move on.
Just in regards, I don't think it's Pandora's box, but we'll see. You talked about signage. We did receive, it wasn't much for signage from, was it Southwest? Councilor Ford?
Southborough had their signage program, yeah.
And didn't we receive some funding for,
Sign on the
I thought
front.
we did.
We didn't get any funding from that program, no. It was
Okay.
prescribed when we applied, fully subscribed when we applied,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, that's all. Thank you.
We're
All
back
right.
in for the next one, but no,
Okay.
we haven't.
Thank you very much, Jeff.
Good, thank you.
And looking forward to the changes. I think next is Joshua who's going to talk about it, or do you want to talk about
The
it?
procedural bylaw?
Yeah.
I'll speak to it.
Okay, fine.
As you saw in my background, council, this has been a touchy one, I'm trying to be careful with it. There's an amendment just simply proposed, you can't make any motions tonight, and I'm not expecting any motions, but trying to balance all the different feedback we've heard. And so I'm just looking for some feedback, is this getting close? I know it's not shared by all. At the end of the day, are we getting close to something that down the road we would put forward for first reading? That's what I'm looking for on this.
Okay, before we move on, can I maybe make a comment? It is not intended for this revision to have 3 readings, before March or the end of March at all.
Yeah, I don't care if you give it any readings until September.
Yeah.
Fine,
It
thank
doesn't
you.
matter to me at all.
So that's what is an important thing to
Yeah.
kind of make sure we put, lay down to bed and before we discuss that. So what I saw in this is that maybe there is a little bit of interesting things that maybe doesn't allow some councillors who are working to then be part of Zoom. The way it's written, Councillor Burton, would you be of that opinion?
That's one of the things I noticed. Could I make a broader comment, Mayor?
Please go ahead.
So, you know, I, kind of to reiterate my position from last time we talked about this, I think it's to our advantage to allow Zoom meetings. You know, I look at times when I've had COVID or I'm gone to Mexico working. I know you don't believe that, but that's why I'm there. You know, Councillor Kenley has come in from work, and I think our meetings are better for having him here than if we said, well, sorry, you're at work, you know, we don't get your input today. So I think this is a good, better, best. So I think the very best we could have would be everybody always in our community and physically at every meeting. In my mind, that's would be the ultimate. And then on the other end of the spectrum would be people not in our community, you know, never at the meetings. That'd be the other spectrum. So if you look at the MGA, if I've read it correctly, and Jeff, correct me if I'm off here, but they've kind of targeted what, I don't think they expect the best because they allow for a counselor to miss, I think it's a rolling 60-day.
Consecutive.
Yeah,
60 days.
so if they miss all the meetings in that rolling 60-day period, it triggers something. So I think the MGA is contemplating that we don't have to be at every meeting.
Yep.
On the other hand, I think it also contemplates the other side, so it sets up two goalposts. That's one. The other goalpost is that we don't have counselors missing more than 60, you know, the meetings within a 60-day rolling period. So I thought, what could we do that would be within those goalposts that would allow for the most people to be here, the most counselors to accommodate their needs? So what I would suggest, can I make a suggestion? So
Please go ahead.
what I would suggest if I were writing this, and I appreciate all the work you've done to write these, I'm not criticizing what's here in any sense. I would make it that we stick within those goalposts so that we say, look, you can attend by electronic meeting, and I don't care where you are. I don't care if you're at work or you're sick or whatever it is. I'm not going to judge that because I don't think they have that in the MGA. But on the other hand, if you exceed that 60 days, then I think it should trigger what is in the MGA, which says now council has to approve it. So what I'm saying is that during that, at any time you can attend by Zoom, or we know whatever other means we set, but for now we'll call it Zoom. But if you are missing more than those goalposts that are already in the MGA, then you can't, those Zoom attendances don't count. In other words, you could only attend by Zoom for the 60 days. So it counts as of having attended, but if it's been by Zoom or missed or some combination of those for 60 days, then it comes back to council to say, well, let's look at all the circumstances. Why are you missing? What is your level of participation? What, you know, we can't measure how much you're in the community, right? I could come to just my meetings and you wouldn't know if I was in the community or not. I think in the community is better than not in the community, but I don't know that one is fatal, but we can't measure it anyway. So that's what I would recommend. I think it allows Zoom meetings. It stays within the parameters of the MGA. It gives council the flexibility to look at it on an extended Zoom conferencing or extended missing or a combination of the two to say, well, why is it? Is it legitimate? Or are you still doing a good job of participating, or whatever that looks like, and they make that decision then. That's already in the MGA as well. That's not something that we've created.
So help me understand a little bit better. Right now, the MGA talks about the restriction on 60 days consecutive meeting,
Yeah.
right? Which is about four council meetings, that's about it. So how do you apply it or revise that language to fit what you're talking about for those who work, who would be working? There wouldn't be that 60-day kind of,
Well, I still think it could, right? And if you say, and then that's what triggers it, so I would just leave it just how it says, except with one change, is that within the 60 days, you can attend by Zoom. But if you go beyond the 60 days, it triggers council having the decision. Am I making sense? Maybe not.
so imagine that within that 60 days, there is a councillor that is like Councillor Kenley. He has to work, or like yourself, but it's not consecutive. It's just one-off.
Well, then it doesn't trigger it because
Okay,
it's
I see
only,
what
it's
you're
only the
saying.
consecutive meetings. So let's use me. Let's say I'm not here in that, at all in the 60-day period. I
Right.
don't tune in by Zoom, I don't show up. That's the easy one. But what I'm suggesting is that we allow people to attend by Zoom.
Yeah,
But if in that 60-day period, they've only attended by Zoom, in other words, they're not here,
right.
then at that point, just like it says in the MGA, it's as though they hadn't been in attendance, and it triggers us to be able to make a decision if that could continue.
All right.
Because that's
So-
really what it is. If you take Zoom out of it, that's what we already have.
Yeah,
Right? If you go
no,
by the MGA, you take Zoom out of it,
60.
I-
not there for 60 days, council gets to
Yeah.
make a decision.
Well, I totally understand. So I did a little bit of a kind of data collection of how we used the Zoom meeting. For example, just not to target him, but for example, Councillor Kenley had in 2024, 4 consecutive meetings. He was at work
Why don't you
and
just
couldn't be.
broad rather than
And-
use
and-
people's names?
Yeah, but it makes no difference there. It's just a reference. So if there was 4 meeting, then with your situation, you would say then if there was possibly another one, council would have to allow it.
So, yes, so if that had happened, so Counselor X isn't here for 4 meetings, they're here on Zoom, but they're not here physically, then for the next one, if Counselor X were going to be working again, we
Yeah.
would have to say, no, that's fine, you're still doing your job, and we get it, and it's not every week, and it just happened to be 4 shifts in a row didn't work, we're good with that.
Okay.
Or we could say, somebody hasn't shown up at all, and they Zoomed in once, we say, we're not good with that.
Yeah.
It just leaves it flexible for council to
Yeah.
look at all the circumstances, use their good judgment.
Because right now, you're on Zoom, you're present.
Yep.
Right.
That's
Yep.
the main criteria.
Yep.
So that would carry on, Councillor Brown.
Burton Brown.
Yes,
B&B.
sorry.
No, you're good. So in here, it says the electronic attendance is approved by a resolution of council. So if in fact Joe Blow was not here, could not be here, council could approve and say, Joe Blow, you can't make it to this meeting, but you want to be a part via Zoom? Absolutely. Or the council of the day can say, no, we don't think that's appropriate, but you're leaving it up to the council of the day to make the decision.
At each meeting?
It's the way I'm
Well, I'm
just
saying,
reading it
what
the
do
way
you
it
want?
is. I'm just reading it the way it is.
Yeah.
The way which is?
The way it's written in here right now.
Well, the way I read it, Counselor Brown,
Can read it
is
this way.
that you couldn't
I'm just
even,
reading it verbatim how it's in there.
Well, maybe
It's
I'm
under
not.
8B.
Maybe I-
Counselors may only attend meetings electronically under one of the following conditions, and then it lists 4. And the last one is the electronic attendance is approved by a resolution of council. So the first one, I don't need to go through all of them. You've
Yeah.
got them in front of
So
you.
I agree with how that reads. I don't know that we need an approval if somebody's at work. Like, you know, for us at the start of a meeting, well, Councillor Kenley, are you home because you're sick or are you at work, you know, or?
I'm just saying, this is the way it is in there. So if
Agreed.
we're gonna tweak it, that has to tweak.
Yeah, I agree. To me, it wouldn't matter why you're gone. Like, I
Right.
trust that we're gonna try to be here.
Right,
And so, you know, I don't have to ask Councillor X, are you at work?
right.
Are you sick? I don't know what the reason is, but I think if you're attending, I don't care as much why you're gone. What would concern me more is if we exceeded some limit. And rather than me dream one up, I would just go by what's in the MGA. If the province thinks 60 days is probably the right number, unless we have a compelling reason to think it's different, I'd say that's probably our standard.
Okay, so Councillor Burton, if I understand, and maybe for Councillor Brown, yeah, I understand what you were referring to. So if we had 8A, you would find that sufficient then?
Eight A?
She's saying if we just had A and not B. So that's what I would suggest, Mayor, is that we have 8A, get rid of B, but then have an additional qualifier that if in that 60-day period, all of the attendances by Councillor X are either absences or electronic, that we're back at the 60-day limit.
Okay. Councillor Brown?
Sorry, I'm just trying to wrap my head around this. So within that 60 days, if Joe Blow does not make it to council physically within those 60 days, we have a problem.
Correct.
No, because you said he could attend by Zoom and be present.
No,
but-
no.
So say what you said again, because I think you
No,
said it well.
because that's not what I understood.
So what I said was,
If you're not here at least once
within the
physically,
60 days, then you're in trouble,
then, well,
according to what
not
you're
we're in
saying.
trouble, but
Oh, but I'm saying-
it triggers council having to make a decision.
Agreed. So you physically have to be here, sitting in these chairs, within that 60 days. That's how you're pitching it, once.
Or council,
Or it gets flagged.
it's flagged and council can then excuse it as long as they want.
This is mentioned right in the MGA, 60 days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we don't have to make that decision, it's already made for us.
Well,
MGA says
we do
60
if we
days.
allow digital. If we allow electronic attendance, we do, because you could have a situation where in that 60 days, somebody attended all 4 meetings electronically.
They're present.
I know, I'm trying to make it work on both ways.
We're right back to square
I
one.
know.
I'll just make this quick. I would support 8B all the way through. You electronically, if you're not here, you're not getting paid. Everything electronically, you're not. And after 60 days, if you haven't been there, you're gone. And I have a bit of an issue even with those that work. When you run for council, you make a commitment to be at council as much as you can, within reason. If your work is interfering with you and you're missing 3 or 4 out of 2 months, or 3 or 4 out of 4 months, I have an issue with that too. So if your work is interfering with your council, you maybe need to choose one or the other. That's my opinion. That's all I'm going to say about it.
Well, Councillor Jensen.
Okay, so what you're saying okay, I just want to,
Sorry, I'm not articulating it.
no, I get what you're saying. But,
However.
so at the end of 60 days, someone could come back, attend one meeting, and then leave again for another 60 days, and the clock is started again. Is that what you're, is that correct?
That's what the legislation already says.
Yep, it does.
Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly what it says. So it's a rolling 60 days, so just like with US, right? If you can only be gone so many days in a 12-month rolling period, same concept, it's already built in. So I think the best way to articulate is what Councillor Brown said, is if you're not physically here in any 60-day period, it then goes to council to say, is that acceptable or not?
Right.
But it still accommodates people checking in, and with respect, I'm completely fine if 4 shifts in a row, somebody has to pull a shift at the hospital, like that, it doesn't, I think it's not fatal.
Yeah. Okay.
All right,
But we made
so.
good headway.
Okay, so Councillor Burton, let me repeat one more time. With this bylaw, you would keep 8A and let the rest be governed by the MGA the way it is.
Yes, but with the complication that if we allow electronic attendance, which I think we should,
Right.
that it would also be triggered by a physical being here, so that you couldn't attend 5 in a row electronically without council approving it.
Okay, but you could be attending 4 times, I mean,
Yes.
how many meetings that is
Yeah.
within the
In that 60 days, you could attend digitally.
Within that 60-day period, you could attend digitally.
Yeah.
And after that, it's up to council to decide if they want to give that person an extension or
So
not.
really what I'm doing is I'm sticking with the MGA, but I'm trying to add
You're tweaking it.
the tweak of, I want people to be able to attend
Zoom.
digitally.
Yeah. I'm okay with that.
Frankly, or whatever our
I
term
would
is.
I would be okay with that,
Well, I'm not.
possibly. Councillor Brown?
So then how's it any different than the way it is right now then?
Thank you.
Well, it's very similar to what we have now, yeah. And
But-
I don't remember, and it's just because I don't remember exactly what we have now, but
Yeah.
we have the concept, because I remember last time I had just read it. So we do have the concept now that if you're gone over a certain period, it's
Yep.
council's decision.
Within 8.
I think we already have that.
8 meetings.
Is the way it's written now.
So 8 meetings is actually, in our side, it'd be 4 months, and the MGA is 2 months.
Right.
And so again, then I would say, well, why are we at 4 if the starting point for everybody in the province is 60 days, why are we at 120 days, or, yeah, 120
Why do
days?
we need to tweak the MGA? It's right there, clear as can be. If you're gone
Big,
60 consecutive days, that's that.
But what does
Doesn't
go-
say anything about
but what does
Zoom
go
or
on mean?
electronic.
So you wouldn't do Zoom?
Absolutely not.
Okay, well,
well, this is what I don't agree. Personally, I would,
Agree.
well, no, Councillor, you,
We don't have to agree on
Councillor, we
things.
don't have to agree on everything.
I agree with you on
But,
that.
personally, I really feel that if people, if somebody would have to be there 4 times on Zoom. I remember at my first council, being a councillor, there were questions already on pushing the time of the meeting to accommodate those who were working. And I'm thinking, you know, we have to kind of remember that there's a lot of people in this community that would love to be on council possibly and are still working. Are we going to help them, accommodate them, do something? I don't know. And some finish their work at 6 o'clock, so what do? We don't give them a chance to run?
and Mayor, I think that is a good point. You know, as much as we like to think otherwise, we're all pretty replaceable.
Right.
You know, we are. But I think some flexibility is warranted if we can, if the cost of that flexibility isn't too onerous. And some of us think it is too onerous, and that's fair enough. Some of us think it isn't too onerous.
Because at the end of the day, it's council that has still the capacity to say no to an extension,
Or to say yes.
both ways. Councillor
So
Jensen.
doesn't, whether we leave 8B in or out,
Leave it in.
Doesn't the MGA kick in regardless
Yes,
of whether it's there or not?
yes.
Well,
I don't see the point of taking 8B out.
8B does not allow for people who are working to be on Zoom.
Well, how does it, how?
No,
No, it doesn't.
If
I
we
think Councillor
want them
Brown's
here
point
at a
was that point
meeting,
4 could.
yes,
We just have to do it every meeting
point 4 does, Mayor.
if we do a
Yeah, but I
resolution.
mean, are you going to be burdened by having something every meeting?
So,
Well, they shouldn't be gone every
So-
meeting.
if I can.
Go ahead.
So that's kind of the point of this policy being brought forward, is for this conversation, right? It wasn't, we're certainly not passing it. This is a work in progress. I wish Counselor Kenley was here so that he could join in on this. So I guess my question is, we've talked a lot about this, Jeff. I'm just wondering, do you have, I would, the way it's written, there are some flags clearly with some of the people sitting around this table and elsewhere. And so I'm just wondering, I would like to see what Counselor Burton, what he's proposing written up. I want to see what that looks like. That's what I would like to say. Because I feel like we could keep talking about this, and I love y'all, but no. So I think moving forward, I feel like we have enough information. Can we see what that looks like?
Want me to wrap that up, Mayor?
Please.
So maybe, and Joshua and I are having conversations
I could
behind our
tell.
hands in hushed tones here. So there's just some interesting navigation of the act. So here's what we know.
Yep.
The act says, it spells out how you're disqualified as a counselor for 60 days, but that you're not disqualified if you're away for town business or by resolution of council. So the act makes that part pretty clear. That's pretty easy to accommodate. The challenge we're initially just seeing, and I don't necessarily want to open this whole can of worms for tonight, but is if on the one hand your procedural bylaw is going to say that attending electronically deems you to be in attendance, then at no point are you in default of the 60 days, technically.
Correct.
And then it's also very strange to say, Councillor Burton, you attended the last 2 months virtually, but now this council is saying, no, we're actually going to pretend like you didn't attend the last 2 months, but you made motions and you participated and you were on the minutes and you were there. And that might all be fine. We don't know. We're taking this in with 5 minutes to think about it. That we have to really work through what that means.
Yeah.
I would disagree with the last conclusion.
Okay.
Because I think if we are at liberty, and maybe we aren't, but if we are at liberty to pass a resolution that nuances what the MGA has given us, then one of those provisions could be that the vote of council is triggered in one of 3 ways. 1, you didn't attend
Yep.
at all for 60 days.
Yep.
2, you attended solely by electronic means
Yep.
in that 60 days.
Yep.
Or C, some combination of those 2.
Right.
We could set that
Yeah.
parameter in advance.
Yeah.
The council would know it. I don't think that, the part I disagree with you on is that it would potentially nullify what they'd done. No, I think they are in attendance, they did vote, they were recognized as being a vote, but on the side, we have a provision that if you did it that way, then something is triggered. What's triggered? What it says in the act is that council then has to authorize
Yeah.
further, or you have to show up. The easy way out of it is you show up. For some, it may not be as easy, and that's why we have the pressure valve of council could excuse that, or whatever.
Yeah, and council, that might all be right. We're just working through in our minds here saying, well, wait a minute, are they deemed in attendance or not? Well, if the bylaw says they are, then they are. Okay, and then we were relying in this draft, it was very intentional just to rely on the act for the consequence. And because we found that putting the consequence in the procedural bylaw is more challenging.
Agreed.
And so.
And maybe not enforceable.
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
right, it's weighing both those out. So anyway, you went down a different road, and again, my intent here with this council, I want to be very clear again, as I tried my backgrounder, is I'm just trying to interpret kind of your collective thoughts on this on paper. So when you asked earlier, Councillor, am I offended if you hit the wording? I don't care at all. I'm just trying to put the wording down that we're hearing in previous meetings. So yeah, we'll go chew on this a little bit. You may be going down some uncharted territory here that we're gonna have to learn about a little bit.
Okay.
But yeah, we can definitely chew on that. I get where you're coming from, Councillor, I really do. And I think I've got good notes to try and see how that would work.
All right, so thank you so much, Councillor Granger. We didn't hear from you. Do you want to add anything? We can't hear you.
No, I think you all understand how I feel about this and what my personal circumstances are. I would just add to what I've said in the past that I think we need to be careful that I'll say it this way, we should do everything we can to encourage people to run for council. So if a potential candidate out there needs some flexibility in this area, I think that we should do what we can to give those people the flexibility ahead of time so that they're not discouraged from running for council. I think we should do everything we can to reach out to the community and get people to run for council. I think that's important. And I said it before, don't kill the fly with an 8-pound sledge. And I think if we're too restrictive, that's what we're going to end up doing.
Okay, thank you, Councillor, for your 2 bets worth. We can always learn from each other's. So thank you very much. Did you bring some food?
Yep. There's a bathroom.
Maybe it is time to take a recess.
I make a motion for a 15-minute recess.
Thank you. All in favor? Thank you very much. And Councillor Burton, thank you for your approach, very forward-thinking.
Jeff?
Totally. Thank you.
I'll take my chances and get this on tomorrow.
Are we good?
Yeah. Should we make a? I'll go get it. I have
What's
a few
next,
minutes.
derelict buildings?
Okay, motion to reconvene.
I make a motion to reconvene.
All in favor? Thank you. All right. And Josh, you will come and help us with two draft policies.
Yeah, I'd be
One
glad
on
to.
derelict and vacant property, the other one on council policy development. So go ahead, take it away.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. This first one is being presented to you in anticipation of the adoption of tax rates for derelict and vacant buildings. So you adopted that bylaw last year. So at this point on that list, we have 13 non-residential properties and 20 residential. All properties received a letter personalized to, specific to their property last August. And we've seen really some good progress. I would say that those numbers I gave you, once we do another drive around, are gonna drop.
Wow.
So because we've seen this kind of action, we're anticipating that you'll get more once people actually have a tax notice in hand. So this policy helps council in defining what portion of the tax might be canceled, reduced, refunded, deferred, provides an appeal process, and imposes conditions on applicants to demonstrate positive action. So that's the summary of the policy in front of you, the draft. What administration is really seeking tonight is your feedback on those conditions. The way this has been set up, it doesn't consider any personal circumstances or plans to do anything as grounds that you would consider changing taxes. Neither does it contemplate market conditions as an excuse either. So it says 2 years is sufficient for any property to be rented or sold in Cardston. Because you know, you'll probably have people saying, look, I've had it here for this price, I just can't move it. This policy just says, I'm sorry, that's not one of the conditions that we're gonna change your tax for. So feedback on that would be great.
Councillor Court?
I like the idea of, if they can't sell it, at least make it look nice. $400 worth of paint's better than getting a big tax hike. I like that. I like the fact that you just sent around that article from another community that they're doing the same thing. So we're not the only community that's running into this problem, and I think it's time to make some moves on them.
Okay.
Personally, I really feel that draft policy is fairly objective, and objective is good. I know in the past, we always, as council, sometimes want to have a soft heart, but I really think that if you have a policy that's well-written and applicable to all who are in the same circumstances, it increases the fairness of the application of a policy. So for that reason, I appreciate what you have drafted.
Great, glad to hear it. Okay.
Go ahead, Councillor Brown.
No, I mean, you're asking each of us. I love this. I think it's fantastic. I support it. I think it's moving everything in the right direction, which is why we started this whole process. So I think it's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Just a question, so
Councillor Burton?
I can't
Councillor
open
Granger?
my document for some reason, but, so Joshua, where this would come into place is they've been given whatever series of notices we're going to give them. They've been offside and their tax has now been assessed at the higher amount. All that's behind us at that point, right? And now they're coming and saying, but here's what I've done. So we've assessed it at the triple rate, but now they're coming to us and saying, but since the assessment, I've painted it, or some, like, what, to help me picture the window that this comes before me,
Sure.
before us.
Sure. So This anticipates that council is also comfortable with the amount of notice that everybody has been given.
Let's say that it is, so
Okay,
we've already
so-
approved the notices, that's been done.
Okay?
When does this come to us?
I imagine people are given their tax bill sometime in May,
June.
June?
Is it June?
So it's been assessed at the higher rate,
Yeah.
and now they're coming for us asking for what?
Well, what we would be able to do from an administrative standpoint is we likely get the call first. And so we can say there's a mechanism for that. You would go to council and demonstrate that you've acted to not be designated as such. Prove that to council in these ways. And because this does not contemplate what you might do, the amount that you would say, okay, we're gonna refund that back would be from September, when you demonstrated that the change took place.
So are they appealing the initial determination that their property is unsightly?
No,
Or are
on
they
this-
appealing, like, what are they
Tax level.
appealing
They are
specifically?
saying, we would like that portion of tax that I'm being levied as a derelict property to be given back to me because I'm no longer derelict. This policy actually states that council decision has no effect on assessment classification. This
So,
is
so
only
between the
tax.
time they're assessed and when they are standing there, they've done something to ameliorate
Yeah.
their derelict nature?
Right.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that seems
Okay.
reasonable.
Jeff,
Go
Jeff,
ahead with your counsel.
What I was trying to make sure is that they weren't going all the way back to I'm not
No.
derelict.
no, no, no.
And that's got to be
no.
behind us
I
at
have
that
to
point.
prove the fact that they have
Yeah,
moved forward.
That I'm
Councillor
good.
Granger?
Yeah, I was in favor of this initiative way back at the beginning, and I'm pleased that we're nearing completion on it, and I thank you for the work you've done. I'm all for it.
Thank you, Jeff.
I don't want to diminish what Joshua said, but just to be clear, because we had a lot of talk on this. We're trying to make it so that council isn't entertaining future plans to move you out of that assessment class.
No,
It's evidence that you've done something. So it
Right.
isn't sufficient for me to say, I really don't want to pay this higher tax, and look, 2 years from now, here's what I plan to do. Okay, we'll take you out.
no,
No, it's when you've done that thing,
right.
provide the evidence and then come back.
And I totally agree with that
We
concept.
just want to be clear that,
No.
that's how we're approaching
No.
this.
It's what I call objective manner to deal with the
So
situation.
just related to this, so I don't know, 2 years ago or something, Councillor Brown brought up the issue of vehicles in yards. And some of the rest of us have had phone calls and things from that.
Be clear,
So-
many.
Yeah, so many,
Thank
Same
you.
here.
yeah, many calls about many vehicles,
I
right?
don't want that in the
Right.
paper.
Yeah. So, you know, when we have another bylaw dealing with vehicles and things in our streets, but I know, if I remember correctly, the answer that we got from administration was, it's not really a vehicle issue, it's a unsightly issue. So if that's the case, are those yards with cars stacked up in them part of what was looked at when they're unsightly? And, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I don't want the cars on blocks to fall through because it's not really unsightly premises and they're not on the street, and, you know what I mean? Like, what does that look like?
So the assessment subclass bylaw does not prescribe a particular means by which a property is deemed derelict. So to make it as objective as possible, administration uses the unsightly property bylaw, but only those which relate to the structure. So lawns, junked vehicles, stuff like that would not make a property derelict in this way. They would be handled under a process that Lear would enforce. So,
Under which
like he did
bylaw?
last year.
Yeah, which
Under which
Unsightly
bylaw?
property,
Unsightly
yeah,
premises.
So
so
are-
it wouldn't be a taxation enforcement approach, I guess.
So are we as equally diligent on that bylaw as we have been on this one? We've done a really good job of this one. Are we out and about
But look at,
looking at the other one?
if I
Those
might,
numbers.
just,
the
New York's
numbers.
report from last year
Yeah.
was 184 unsightly premise
Yeah.
citations, right? I mean, that's
Yeah.
170 more than we've
Yeah.
probably historically done.
No, agreed, it's just that some of them, they're still stacked there, you know what I mean?
Agreed.
Coun-
Here we are, this
Councillor
much later.
Burton, Councillor Granger is waiting for his turn. I can't hear you.
The other bylaw that would be applicable would be that Good Neighbors bylaw that we passed a couple of years ago. I think there's verbiage in that too.
So, just to address the concern about the junked vehicles, I know that we've had conversations internally about the focus, and to kind of get people used to the idea of being more diligent about managing their property according to those bylaws. Lior did a ton of work last year, and I know that improper storage of materials in yards and junked vehicles is a particular focus for this next year for him.
Good. All right, so, councillors, are we comfortable with that policy? Personally, I am.
Yep.
Are you? Are you all in favor? So, Joshua, carry on with your policy and make it a final draft.
Certainly.
Thank you. Go ahead with the 5D, council policy development.
Okay. So throughout last year and the beginning of this year, we've had a lot of opportunity to work on policy, and part of that was reviewing how policy is moved throughout the organization. So the review provided some recommendations to reduce opportunity for error and just improve the distribution. But acting on this would require that this council policy be amended. So this amendment is before you to primarily allow policy storage practice to change from hard copy to digital. It's more efficient, it's really safer, so we don't have rescinded policies kind of floating around out there. It allows the town website to be the primary source where current policy is accessed by everybody, and we're going to direct people as such. And then it adds a requirement that all elected officials and employees are notified directly of changes as they happen. And so that the amendment and the text in particular is all there in blue for you.
Yeah.
So any other questions, glad to answer.
Councillor Burton.
So Joshua, I think it's paragraph 5, it's just opening up here. 5, yeah, so,
Standards,
yeah,
understand
so one of those is a little bit circular, so it says that the policies shall comply with the policies. And I don't, 5's a little bit long and I'm just not seeing it, but maybe just have a look at that.
It's
So-
5A, yeah. I see what
5A.
you're saying, Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I see that there, thank you.
So it's a little bit circular how it's written. I think
Okay.
probably the thought is that we would make sure that new policies don't contradict old policies, or, you know, in other words, there's some harmony amongst them, but just that wording might get tweaked up.
Any other comments regarding the changes?
Just for
Jeff?
council, I think this goes without saying, but to be clear, while we're looking at how these are approved and moved, it doesn't change council's discretion
No.
over approving any changes to council policies. That's still done at your table by motion. That doesn't amend at all.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the way you kind of redrafted that policy. It's add clarity and it's definitely a leaner, better
Good.
way to deal with policies and the management of them.
On 3C, it says, what's that word? RESCISSION, what does that mean? Rescission?
C, councillor, is that what it says?
Yeah.
So
It's
rescission
under
is,
scope and authority, storage and distribution.
Where do
3C.
you see that?
Oh, yeah, rescission, just being rescinded.
Okay, I just wondered what that word meant.
Oh.
Past tense of being rescinded, I
Okay.
guess.
Yeah, rescission, yeah.
for the verb of it.
Yeah.
I'm
that's right, the
rescinded.
actual-
All my years
Yes.
of teaching, I've never heard that thing before.
Good.
Sure.
So maybe we can give it
Adverb, I guess.
a final touch
Great.
with that change suggested,
Certainly.
and we'll be great.
Okay.
Thank you so much for that good work. All right. On the 6th, we have a draft fire service agreement, and I'm highly encouraged you, Councillor Brown and Councillor Granger, for your work on that board. And I think Jeff has worked a lot with Murray also on that, and with the fire chief, so take it away.
Yeah, Council, you have in your package a draft. This is not a final document by any means. It will require council approval to formalize the regional fire service. This is without the town of McGrath. So years ago, we did a study. We hired a consultant to look at regional, including McGrath. Councillor Granger and I spent some time in McGrath with that council, trying to persuade them to participate. But it was to no avail, I'm afraid. And so this kind of went dormant for a little while as we retooled and tried to decide what to do. I was working with my colleague, Mr. Milward, who, by the way, I appreciate he's done a ton of the heavy lifting on this iteration, and I've really appreciated his work, to look at how could we make this work without McGrath, with the two villages and the town and the county. And so what we have in front of you, and I do want to hit about 8 or 10 points that in my interpretation, without reading the whole document, are just points to make sure that you as council are very aware. So what this does is it contemplates essentially how this would look, is we would still have the governing board, 2 councillors from the town of Cardston, 2 from the county, and 1 each from the villages. But all of the items of the fire department are owned by Cardston County. And all of the volunteers and staff of the fire department are employees of Cardston County. And this firmly sets the liabilities portion of this arrangement, WCB, liabilities insurance, those types of things, because that's been ambiguous and we've actually had issues over a number of years. And again, the 2 councillors can speak to some of that. And this would be managed not only by the Joint Emergency Services Committee, by the Joint Governance Committee. There would also be a Joint Emergency Services Committee, which is essentially Murray and I and the fire chief. So the goal there is to have a little more administration support before things get to and go to the board. So particularly long-term capital planning, budgeting, those types, policy, those types of things would be taken care of. So in the agreement, and if you wish to scroll through, if not, I'll just reference it, but some of the key pieces, page 5, Article 6, this does appoint a joint fire coordinator. So this was contemplated when we had one more municipality, that someone would be responsible to coordinate the activities. But Murray is saying that would just be my role. So this is a county operation. They'd be the county staff. I'll just act in that role as the joint fire coordinator. Of course, we have our fire chief that would be the same. Article 7, all firefighting equipment and supplies are owned by Cardston County, and there's further description in other areas. There's about 6 schedules to this as well. All employees of the fire department will become part-time employees of Cardston County and fall under their WCB. Any facilities will be owned by the municipalities in which they are located. So the town would continue to have ownership of the fire hall. We would have probably the exact same lease arrangement that we currently do. All that would remain for the most part in place. And we would the town would now lease the facility to the fire department.
So Jeff, just for my interest, imagine there is a decision to have an extension to our fire hall.
Correct.
It's totally all capital
Actually,
expenditure?
no, in the agreement, improvements to any of the buildings would be dealt with and shared with the parties.
Shared, thank you.
So it would flow through the budget,
Okay, thank you.
is what the intent is.
So
Councillor
just
Burton?
related to that, so just like we have it with the Ag Society, we put in those provisions that even though they may be funded by the society, at least annually, there's a
A transfer, right?
transfer
of
clause
assets, yeah.
that puts it into our capital,
Yeah.
and that'd be the same with an addition to the building, for
Right.
example, very clear that
Yeah.
it's one of our assets.
So what will need to happen, there's two main documents that we have to get prepared before we can fully execute this agreement. One is the lease. So I think we have a good template, by the way, for a kind of commercial lease and how that'll look. So the lease has to be put together. And the other thing is that all the municipalities need to do a fire service level policy. So we need to be able to tell the county, okay, county, we're contracting you for this service, and here's the level of service we require as a community. Now, this gets a little bit complicated, but I think it's certainly workable. The operational budget share is prescribed within our intermunicipal collaboration agreement. I have it in the back,
Yeah,
with 46% and 42%, that kind of thing. But if we go in and say we want a different level of service than we have traditionally provided under that funding model, then we
have
are
to pay
responsible
more.
to pay the lion's share of that service. And I think that makes sense. I have no argument with that at all. So I'll give you probably the most real-life example is if the town says we want X amount of inspections annually. So we want to make sure that we have safety codes, trained people that can do fire inspections on 40 commercial and institutional businesses annually. Well, we haven't had the capacity to do that historically.
Right.
So the answer from the county might be, we can provide that, we can get people trained, but we're gonna bill you X amount per inspection to recoup that cost above and beyond what the conventional cost sharing is. And I think that's highly appropriate. I don't have a problem with that.
I have a follow-up question. So my other question was equipment. So I haven't read the definition, but are we really careful with our definitions? So for example, I could see the equipment, let's say an oxygen tank. I'll just make it up.
Right.
This isn't my area, but, so when we buy it, the oxygen tank looks a lot like equipment. Once we put it in the truck, bolt it into place, it kind of feels like it might be truck, which might be a different category than equipment. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Okay.
so I assume that equipment doesn't include the vehicles, is that right? Or it does now?
It would.
It would. Okay, so if they all land in the same place, it doesn't matter. but-
Yeah.
Yeah.
So vehicles
Yeah.
that we own right now, we're going to transfer to the county?
Yeah, and we have to figure out what that asset transfer looks like as part of this process too,
Okay.
yes.
Well, that does clean it up, because I was just thinking, okay, if we own the
Right.
truck,
Right, good point.
they're leasing the
Yeah,
building, and the
right,
equipment
yeah,
goes in the
yeah,
truck, it
yeah,
starts to
yeah.
look like a ball
Sure.
of
Yeah.
string.
Sure, that's a good
Yeah.
point. I'll be very mindful of that when we go through this one more time, when Murray and I go through. And because we need to, on paper, transfer those assets that we currently own in that authority
Yeah,
and
'cause
make that work.
otherwise, yeah, just, you got the points.
Okay, great. No, I appreciate it. Now, one interesting point on this that's different from what we contemplated with McGrath was when we were contemplating it with McGrath, one of the things that was in there, and this was recommended, well, it was in the template that we got from the consultant, was that this would be done by ministerial order.
Right.
We've removed the ministerial order component, that we don't need that, but we have a long-term, we have an 18-month withdrawal period. So if, and I can't envision why exactly this would happen, but if, you know, the Town of Cardston Future Council said, you know what, we don't like this arrangement anymore, we want out. We're out. Okay, we give our 18 months notice, somehow we have to come up with the capital to purchase all of the equipment necessary to staff a fire department.
Yeah, good luck.
I just don't see it.
No.
But we have an 18-month withdrawal clause, and then we agree upon, we would have to sit down with the committees and come up with the settlement of ownership interests, is what would have to be determined. And that would be messy at best, is what I would suggest. I'm not trying to coat that any other way. And you'd have to do that with a ministerial order anyway. If the minister allowed you to leave, you'd have to figure out how you were disposing of assets.
Councillor Brown?
So Jeff,
Councillor Burton?
close enough, B.
Sorry.
We're on the Bs tonight. So, Jeff, if, I assume that with the ministerial order, one of the reasons for that was the minister would have some level of jurisdiction over what the mess looked like to make sure that everybody was treated fairly. So if we take that out, have we put in any kind of other than goodwill efforts by the
Procedure.
two parties, any kind of dispute resolution, like a,
Here, yeah.
So there is,
we might, I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, you know what I mean, on that? But
Yeah.
if we get rid of the minister, we
Yeah.
also get rid of some arbiter of what fair looks like.
Yeah,
yes,
that's right.
so there's two things. One, in the event of the inability of the parties to settle any of the foregoing, I'm reading, by the way, this isn't recited, the outgoing issues, matters, or things shall be referred to be resolved pursuant to the dispute resolution procedure, and which is essentially in the event of a disagreement between the parties, The party shall, oh, and I have a whole schedule on it, sorry. It was just referring that.
If you, I don't care about the
Yeah.
detail, I
There's
just
a
want to
whole-
make sure we've
yes.
thought of it.
We have a whole schedule. If we can't come to agreement, then it's the mediation arbitration
Yes.
type of
Yeah,
idea, yes.
okay, good.
All right.
Just a couple other quick things, Mayor. There's a number of schedules, but
Many.
they are defining the Joint Governance Committee Board. They are defining the Joint Emergency Services Committee, which is the administrative side.
And I appreciate that you added that to that agreement, because I think it's going to unburden and allow for better budget discussion among the three of you. I think it will be better for the board when they get those budgets this way. They won't have to have the contention,
Absolutely.
so that'll be great.
Yeah, so, I mean, there's a lot there. I'm trying to hit on the high points, but if there's any questions, now's the time to field them. Murray and I are gonna go over this again. He presented this to his council. If it wasn't yesterday, it was the Monday before. So he and I will go through things one more time with this kind of feedback, make sure we shore up areas of concern. We still have to define how we're determining the value of assets going to the county and what that means for the town, because the town has paid for those. The ratepayers have paid for those, and we've got to make sure that is fair and appropriate. So we've got some work to do there. I just want to make sure that before we really dig into those numbers, that there seems to be political support to go down this road.
Personally, you have my support. Everybody's support.
Yep.
So we're good. Councillor Brown?
No, I think this is fantastic. I read this. I'm the counselor, one of the counselors that's on this board, and we've been talking about this forever, and we've wanted to get this going, but McGrath has held us up. So I'm super excited to finally, for the love, get the ball rolling, that hopefully we can have this all wrapped up before the next election so that we can start moving forward with this, because our committee, every time we meet, which is monthly, and we're talking about things, I feel like a lot of times it comes back to, if this was in place, we wouldn't have to be, So I just feel like this is fantastic. I'm super excited. And
Go ahead.
and I wanted to know if the county, but you just said they just sent it, so that's awesome. Thank you.
The only thing I was wondering, when you're transferring the assets, there is also that financial aspect. I mean, the fire chief has a bank account somewhere and something like that. So all that is going to also be transferred to the county.
Yeah, so the financial management of the fire department will be solely through the county. And so, yes, that'll be better. And again, this is such an interesting scenario, because we have a governance of our fire authority that hasn't technically been appropriate for a lot of years, but it's worked.
Yeah.
And so we haven't been terribly panicked about it. And that's a good thing. We're not doing this because we have a wreck. We're
Right,
not trying to
no.
put out the fire. That's too much on the nose for this discussion, but we're not attempting to do that.
Yeah.
It's just that we saw an area where things were lacking. We saw where there was some liability for all the municipalities. This is a lot of the same reason years ago we went to the commission at the Solid Waste Commission, because we saw liabilities hanging out there. We saw assets and employees and bank accounts that were being operated by an authority that doesn't have that authority, but it
Right.
was working. And we got
Yeah.
that cleaned up. And this one's, I think, a good move. And the fact of the matter is, and while I do think this is a good thing, we have political will from our friends at the county too. And we don't know what that looks like after the election,
Yeah.
right?
And
And
so-
so there is some expediency to start working this.
So I
getting it done.
appreciate that. I appreciate all that cleanup is great. Councillor Granger?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, we had a really, really good consultants report at the beginning of the exercise. I want to compliment the other members of the committee. They were just a pleasure to work with. We wrote out the difficulties with McGrath not wanting to be part of it, and we sorted all the details out. And everybody did such a positive, good job on this. It was wonderful to be a part of. One of the things that I was concerned about was the recommendation in the consultants report was either the county or the town be the main agency running this thing. And at first I was concerned that, well, what are we giving away, or should we give it away, the halls in Cardston, those kind of things. But I was very quickly assured myself that the way we've ended up is the right way to do it for a number of reasons. And I overcame my skepticism, and I think the county are true partners with us on this one. I think Councillor Brown feels the same way. It was a really, really good exercise. And Jeff, you and the folks at the county have done an amazing job of putting a very complicated thing together. So I thank you for that. And yeah, let's get this thing in place before the end of our term.
Thank you very much. It's very positive feedback. I appreciate that very much. And yes, Jeff, thank you. And you can thank your partner at the county for all that, the support he gave us on that one, and their council for that matter. So thank you very much. We have the Compost Program. Now that was an interesting thing that former council wanted to have to help citizens that could not truck their waste to the field, but to the station, transfer station, but it's problematic. Go ahead.
Okay, so this is one that we don't actually need to make a final decision on even until we do mill rate, because it's a line item in the budget. But for the last probably 5 years, Jill, 5 or 6 years, we've been buying compostable bags. People can come to the office, we give them out, and then we send someone by every Friday to pick them up on the curb. And in theory, that's a great thing. We did, when we started this program, we actually had an end use for the compost, and the county used to have their livestock composting program out at the landfill, and they needed all the nitrogen they could get. So things like lawn clippings and that were great. We had a great way to get rid of them. They discontinued that program. So then we started shipping the clippings and everything up to the agrodome, and they were spreading it around on the field, and livestock were nibbling on it until we killed some livestock because their stomachs were chock full of plastic. And so we discontinued that practice. The reason this was on this agenda is because I took my garbage up on Thursday and saw this pile and just was furious.
Yeah.
The pile right now is more garbage than compost. Yeah. Doug is really struggling. He's asking for help. That he says the volume at the transfer station is more than any other time in his time there. The people are unruly. They're mean. They don't want to follow the rules. So he leaves one place and they trash one. He goes to the back and he can't keep ahead of it. So that, as I said in my backgrounder, that illustrates a second problem of the requirements to manage the transfer station, and we're working on that. We hope to have some extra manpower out there and also have our cameras updated and wired up again. There was some utility construction that cut a bunch of the wires, and so we're getting all that fixed up. But no, even so, we put up brand new signage. Last year we had a seasonal student that sat there, and even with that, people just, if you even attempt to talk to them, they tell you where to go, how to get there aggressively, dump things where they want. Like right now, if you go to the burn pile, it's full of all manner of stuff that isn't wood, that doesn't belong there. The compost pile, this picture I took is, I mean, there was somebody that dumped out like a 5-gallon bucket of toys in the compost pile. And it just doesn't have any sense. And so what's happening is we're expending for bags, which isn't the end of the world. We're sending one of our public works people around every Friday. We're doing all this work, and we don't send the compost anywhere. We push it in the burn pile when the fire's hot. And so the intent is to keep it out of the garbage stream. That was the intent. So it doesn't go to the landfill, and I guess burning it accomplishes that. But not in the summer, because it's green and it really doesn't burn well. But I just want you to be thinking when we bring budget back, if there's support for us removing that program until we can get a handle on the use of the transfer station, because I would say it's almost out of control. We've got to get, unfortunately, and we pay the costs for the staffing for this regional transfer station, but we're going to need to have another staff member there most days in order to check, meet people at the entrance, ask them what they have, instruct them where it goes, and if they observe people not complying, take a license plate and we'll send them an illegal dumping ticket based on license plate. It's what we're going to have to shift into here, because it's quite a mess out there, and people are, for some reason now we have a massive pile of rock and concrete and blocks and bricks now, and we have all kinds of neat things popping up, and so we've got to get a better handle, but we're wasting a lot of time and energy on the compost program right now.
Councillor Burton?
I very much appreciate the fact that it's Councillor Granger who's now on solid waste. With that preamble, yeah, I've gone there, I think I showed you pictures, Jeff, where construction, like obviously construction, like maybe 300 pallets.
Yeah.
Or 400, like it was
Yeah,
20 feet of pallets that, that's not household garbage.
yeah.
So somehow, yeah, it needs to be monitored. But a question, so at these facilities, there's no really anybody, because if I were guessing, we have a lot of people from the county, just knowing who people are, people from the county and from the reserve and things dump in our facility.
Yeah.
There's no concept of screening who can dump other than commercial's not supposed to, is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's difficult to.
We just take them as they come, as long as it looks like it's residential.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, in town, you have curbside pickup. So you may have an odd project on a Saturday that, you run some things up. But I live in the county. I go every Thursday with a truckload of garbage because I have to. It's my only place to dispose of it. Aside from we're now emptying our commercial dumpsters almost 7 days a week now just to keep them from being overflowed.
For
because
example,
that's
though,
where
you'll
everybody's
see
dumping garbage.
truckloads that are clearly headed for the
Yeah.
dump, coming all the way past K&D, like sailing right through to our dump.
Yeah, Doug was telling me he's got a few people now with like double axle dump trailers that are
Yeah.
throwing some domestic garbage on top and then backing in there and dumping it and getting out of there. And we're doing more than, we're filling that station every day we're open, almost 1.5 times.
Something is wrong.
So just to give you some
Yeah.
idea of the volume going through there, and I was visiting with Doug on Thursday, he says, I've never seen the volume like this.
Yeah.
And so he's just
Councillor
trying to keep ahead
Jensen,
of it.
and then I'd like to have, go
You
ahead.
know, the problem, as I see it, is that people don't want to sort their garbage.
Sure.
So, and I know that I have fallen short on this, because I don't know, I have a truck box, and I'm cleaning out the garage, and I've mowed the lawn and whatnot, and so I just throw it all in the box.
Yep.
And then I go to dump it, but then I find out that I have to sort it, and I have. I was good, I sorted it. It was a pain, but my son and I sorted it. But, I think that maybe people don't, A, want to sort it, and B, maybe they don't know that they need to sort it, or, I don't know.
Jeff, can I ask you something? Years back, we were talking about maybe putting a scale or putting someone at the entrance to kind of direct them, as you were saying.
Yeah.
Would a scale be something that?
So I'm not opposed to the idea of a scale as long as we now go back and get rid of all the dumpsters in town, because those will just get used so they don't have to pay.
That's right.
And we're just gonna have our back alleys and ditches full of garbage. So that's one of the consequences of scaling and paying for it is, and I mean, right now, and this is common, so go out to the transfer station right before it opens,
And
there's
it's
likely
right
piles of
there,
garbage
yeah.
just laying in the ditch.
Yeah, you're right.
Because somebody goes there a half hour before it opens, they can't be bothered, so they chuck it thinking someone's gonna pick it up for them. And so
Yeah, so
the
true.
concerns are you gotta go backwards and figure out how to mitigate those issues along the way if you're gonna start charging.
Okay, thanks.
Well, and that's one of the beautiful things about Cardston. When we had our apartment building in Lethbridge, we would go to the Lethbridge dump often to get rid of stuff. And yeah, you're weighed,
in and out, yeah.
and because it was commercial, we had to pay more than if it was residential, and it was, oh, no, I don't, I mean, and by the way, the man who works at the dump is fantastic, and he is so kind, and he is
Helpful.
like,
Yeah.
he's
Cheerful.
just, he really is, and he'll help you clean out your box, and he is fantastic. So it frustrates me that he is being disrespected, because that's truly unkind,
Right on.
because he's amazing.
I think scales would only be warranted if we took commercial, but we don't take commercial. So I think if we can just say,
Yeah,
somehow either screen it or a huge penalty if it starts to be commercial,
yeah.
we don't need the scale.
Councillor Granger?
Yeah, we're not the only community in the world that has had this kind of problem, especially in small towns and in rural areas. So Jeff, is it in the cards as a possibility to hire, say, one extra person that can, be there and monitor that facility on the when it's open to police and direct people accordingly? Because of the cost of trying to do all this cleanup and after the fact is equal to the cost of a staff person.
Right.
I don't know the answer to that, but if they were roughly the same, it might be worth adding an extra person to, basically show people what to do and crack the whip a bit.
Yeah. So Joshua and I have been having some discussion on that. We may have some capacity, particularly in the winter, we may have some capacity internally to kind of pass the calendar around and, get some people out there on those days. We did have a seasonal student last year, and again, this is nothing about the student, he was fantastic, but the belligerent nature of so many people was really intimidating for that person as a youth, and it wasn't fair that we put them in that situation.
Well, like you say, take license numbers and get the police out there. And the other aspect of this that's really important is maybe we need to step up some education, some advertising, some PR to try and drive the message home to townspeople that they ought to behave better and treat the facility better.
Yeah, that's all parts for sure. Like I said, we're working through that a bit right now. We think we have that cemetery position that's being advertised right now, so particularly in the winter, there's some capacity there to help in that role. And then we may have to pick, Public Works has this week and, maybe I'm out there with a clipboard one Saturday just to vent some frustrations or something. I don't know, we'll see.
Okay.
But, yeah, the education component will be critical too. So
So-
just keep it in mind as we get into budget.
So Jeff, do you want to let that go until budget time?
Yeah, we're okay. Like I said, if it's something, we may bring you back a budget without the compost program in it.
Okay, all right.
And we'll talk about it a little more at that time.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Okay.
Okay, so I think we have under 7 questions, I think we kind of dealt with it, but maybe you have
I have
another
a
one?
committee question. So as I sit in these council meetings, it seems there's a lot of items where we bump into other municipalities, particularly the county, but sometimes like today, we're talking about the villages and things like that. Our intermunicipal committee, whatever that's called, is it broad enough that it covers, like, how broad is its
It's really.
discussion, or what is it dealing
well-
with? I know there's the buffer around, if it takes place in the 1 mile and all of that, but, I can't think of it off the top of my head, but, we kind of get one a week where we bump into something that could be discussed and improved if we had good cooperation amongst the counties, even if it's going well, you know what I mean? Like, does somebody take notes and say, okay, here's another issue to deal with, the counties or the villages, or
Yeah.
what's the scope of that committee?
Yeah, I sometimes think that maybe we have not been as thorough with our follow-up when we had things that come with the county. Also, Jeff has great communication with Murray. But I think we have somewhere in our ICF that we would communicate or send them, if we were to write to a minister, that we would let them know
Yeah,
we
just
have
all
done
those types of
that.
things, because I'm thinking if we sit here and we spend 8 minutes discussing it, and all we did was discuss it, what's
Well,
that?
give
And I know
me-
lots of times it was Jeff communicating back, but,
Give me a practical example.
well, I mean, the fire that we talked about today, it has its own committee, but that type of thing. So, the powwow,
So the answer is
But you have
yes,
a community.
because we have the county councillor,
on that committee.
right?
Right.
So
Yeah,
I would
and I'm
say,
failing to think of some, but just as we go along, we kind of bump into these things that they don't neatly fit into that committee, and they don't neatly fit into fire, and I don't know.
Jeff may want to
Maybe
say
it's not a
something.
concern, but I just,
I just want to answer your initial question. So technically, the scope of the ICF committee is the discussion of those services that are
joint.
used by members of more than one municipality. That would be the way I would define it. So if there's a service being provided that benefits the residents of more than one
That's
municipality,
a pretty
the
broad
term.
description.
Well, that's.
Arguably.
That's the scope of ICF by definition.
Yeah.
Well, maybe
that's-
next time we come across one, I'll say, there's one right there, but
Okay,
Great.
Councillor Brown.
But I would say, I mean, I hear what you're saying, but I would definitely say a lot of us sit on committees monthly with our county councilors where we have a fantastic rapport with them. Like, I can't think of one of my boards that the county is not on with me, where we're either driving out together, coming back together, and we're having the conversations. Oh, yeah, they came and talked to you, they talked to us too.
okay, well, maybe everything's in great shape. And I wasn't suggesting it wasn't, but just, I mean, I've sat on another
But that's
council
this
for two
council.
5-year stints, and sometimes when,
Previously, I would say no. Previous council, we didn't have that relationship. But I would say this council with this council for the county, I think we absolutely have that open.
okay, I just
what are
want to
you
make sure
doing?
the
What are
water
we
gets to
doing?
the end of the road when we talk
Yeah.
about something, right?
Well, and they will literally even text us when they're being pitched, saying, what
What do
did
you
you
guys
guys
think?"
give them?
Okay.
They're asking for this, so,
And I'm not suggesting there's a problem, I just,
no, it's good to look out for.
you know, just to make sure
Yeah.
that we're taking notes and the follow-up.
If I might, Mayor, just two things I was thinking about. One is we use the to-do list for tracking council things. That's really easy for me to kind of have a list of ICF matters, and when they come up, I can make a note in meetings. But as a good example that I think went really well, at our last ICF meeting, so Councillor Jensen, Councillor Court, nope, Councillor Granger. Councillor Granger, Councillor Jensen, the mayor. We just happened to bring up that, hey, this Francophone school is looking, coming into town.
That's an example,
And the
yeah.
councillors from the county were like, hey, when you get your costs together, let us know, we'll talk to them, or you come make a presentation. We want to have that discussion, and that's an elevated level of dialogue that I haven't seen for a while. And
And they even committed to paying some of it.
yeah, so.
Right, like today it was, thinking back, it was the presentation about seniors housing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So those
Yeah.
types of things.
Now, that brings me to, did you want to say something, Councillor Johnson? No. Okay, so Councillor Court, just regarding that topic of senior housing, did you ever hear Becky Doig mention that she wanted council to know that we should start to reserve land?
We've talked about it, but this is really.
Because I never
yeah.
heard it until I read the presentation. And I wondered if that was discussed before and never brought back.
There's been talk about it, but not to that extent that she was talking about.
But it sounded like she said that she was trying to encourage the members of the board to kind of bring it back to the councils.
I don't remember her talking about capital, savings for capital in that either, so, I mean, she's been putting a lot of work into trying to figure out this Chinook Foundation thing. We seem like in Cardston we're on the wrong end all the time. McGrath and Raymond got new hospitals back in the 80s, and they basically get new seniors. And all of a sudden, here we are stuck getting
Yeah.
paid for everything.
But you
But I
know
don't-
what?
I know it's been a concern, and we're trying to move forward on doing something with the Chinook Lodge, but we're in the early planning stages, and I don't, we've talked about land, but we're not, she hasn't really talked about where. I know we've talked about going west, but we don't know
Yeah,
yet.
I mean,
We're not at that point
for
yet.
me was obvious that what she was trying to say is that we need to start to reserve land, start to think about parcels of land that could
Well,
accommodate
yes,
what I
that's-
need.
That's true.
Yeah. And I think at the time that we're starting to look at reserved land, maybe it's this time for us to think that way too. Okay, thank you. All right, under 8, you have correspondence, South Grove, there's an economic summit. You went to that meeting before, Councillor Brown, would you like to assist?
I would.
Okay, so maybe if you put Councillor Brown. Anybody else would be interested? They're quite good, actually. I went there a few times. I was on South Grove for many years. So they're good. And so that is the end of the public portion of this meeting. So Mary, thank you very much for representing Temple Star. And so if you want to put a motion forward, I would appreciate.
Somebody else.
I think it can be pretty
I
quick.
think we can too.
Counselor, make a motion.
Make a motion that we go into closed session.
Thank you.
Adjourned when he said that.
Are you trying to,
I was ready to
okay,
roll.
can you take a 5-minute recess?
Oh, sure.
Closed session washroom break, I
Yeah.
guess.
Okay, all right. All in
We won't tell
favor?
anyone about it, Counselor.
All in favor, thank
She
you.
did it quietly.
Yeah, we won't tell anyone.
Now that she's going, what the heck?